President Toshiko Hasagawa, convening the regular meeting of February 11th, 2025. The time is 10:32 a.m. We're meeting in person at Pier 69, which is Port of Seattle headquarters, in the chambers as well as virtually on Microsoft Teams. Present with me today are Commissioners Cho, Feldman, and Mohammed, who are currently gathered in executive session, waiting the opening of the public meeting, and Commissioner Calkins is absent and excused. We're going to recess into executive session to discuss two items. The first regarding collective bargaining per RCW 42.30.1404 and potential litigation, legal risk per RCW 42.30.1101I for approximately 30 minutes. And the second item is going to be regarding national security and computer network security per RCW 42.30.110AI and potential litigation and legal risk, also for 30 minutes. We'll reconvene in public session at 12 o'clock p.m. Thank you.
We are in recess.
This is Commission President Toshiko Hasagawa reconvening the regular meeting of February 11th, 2025. The time is 12:11 p.m. and we're meeting in person at the Port of Seattle headquarters building in the Commission chambers, as well as virtually on Microsoft Teams. Clerk Hart, please call the roll for all commissioners in attendance.
Thank you. Beginning with Commissioner Cho.
Present.
Thank you. Commissioner Feldman.
Present.
Thank you. Commissioner Hasagawa.
Present.
Thank you. And Commissioner Mohammed.
Present.
Thank you. Commissioner Calkins is absent and excused from the meeting today.
Thank you very much. A few housekeeping items before we begin. For everyone in the room, please turn your cell phones to silent. And for anyone participating on Microsoft Teams, please mute your speakers when not actively speaking or presenting. Please also keep your cameras off unless you're a commissioner or a member of the staff participating virtually and are actively addressing the commission. Members of the public addressing the commission during public comment may turn on their cameras when their name's called to speak, and you will turn them back off again at the conclusion of remarks. And for anyone at the dais, please turn off computer speakers and silence your devices. Please also remember to address your request to speak through the chair and wait to speak until you've been recognized. You'll turn your microphones on and off as needed. All of the items noted here will ensure a smoother meeting. Thank you. All votes today will be taken by the roll call method or by general consent, so it's clear for anyone participating virtually how our votes are cast. Commissioners will say aye or nay when your name's called. And I'd like to acknowledge that we're meeting on the ancestral lands and the waters of the Coast Salish people with whom we share the commitment to steward these natural resources for ourselves and for future generations. This meeting is being digitally recorded and may be viewed or heard at any time on the Port's website and may be rebroadcast by King County Television. Now, please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag,
The United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So our first item of business today is the approval of the agenda. As a reminder, if a commissioner wishes to make a general comment for or against an item on the consent agenda, it's not necessary to pull it for a separate discussion. Rather, you may offer general supporting or opposing comments later in this meeting once we get to that part of the agenda. However, it is appropriate if a commissioner wants to ask questions of staff or wishes to have a dialogue on a consent agenda item to request that the item be pulled for a separate discussion at this time. So with that, commissioners, are there any items to be pulled from the consent agenda item or motions to rearrange orders of the day? Then now, commissioners, the question is on approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
Moved.
I'll second.
The motion's been made by Commissioner Mohammed and seconded by Commissioner Cho. Are there any objections to the approval as presented or amended? Hearing none, the agenda is approved. Thank you very much. Moving forward to specials order of the day. I will pass it over to Executive Director Metrick to introduce the item.
Let me go ahead and read that into the record. And Yep, I forgot that note, so apologies. This is item 4A. It's a proclamation proclaiming February 19th, 2025 as a day of remembrance and recognition of Executive Order 9066.
Good afternoon, President Hasegawa and Commissioners. This proclamation recognizes the profound significance of February 19th as a day of remembrance, marking a dark chapter in our nation's history. On this day in 1942, Executive Order 9066 led to the forced removal and incarceration of over 120,000 Japanese Americans, including many from Washington State, solely based on their ancestry. This proclamation serves as a solemn acknowledgement of past injustices and a reaffirmation of our commitment to equity, justice, and the protection of civil liberties for all. By remembering these injustices, we honor the resilience of Japanese Americans and renew our dedication to ensuring that history's mistakes are never repeated. Commission's Strategic Advisor, Francis Cho, will present the proclamation and the speakers with us here today.
Thank you very much, Executive Director. Good afternoon, Madam President, Commissioners, Executive Director Metrick. My name is Francis Cho, Commission Strategic Advisor. This proclamation designates February 19, 2025, a day of remembrance and recognition of Executive Order 9066, and is being introduced by Commission President Hasegawa. Today, 3 distinguished community members will help read the proclamation into the record. Irene Yamamoto is a Densho board member. Densho, a nonprofit organization, seeks to document oral histories from Japanese Americans who were incarcerated during World War II. This evolved into a mission to educate, preserve, collaborate, and inspire action for equity. Next, we will have Kyle Kinoshita, co-president of the Japanese American Citizens League Seattle chapter. JACL is a national organization whose mission is to secure and safeguard the civil and human rights of Asian and Pacific Islander Americans and all communities who are affected by injustice and bigotry. Last, we will have Dale Watanabe, Nisei Veterans Committee Commander. The Nisei Veterans Committee, a veterans organization whose mission in part is to preserve and honor the Japanese American legacies and to provide community programs that meet the educational, cultural, and social needs of the broader community. Without further ado, I will yield to Irene Yamamoto to begin the reading of the proclamation.
Thank you. Whereas history reminds us of the critical importance of vigilance in upholding civil rights and justice for all, and the unjust treatment of Japanese Americans during World War II serves as a solemn reminder of the consequences of racial prejudice and injustice. And whereas on February 19, 1942, President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066, signifying one of the most sorrowful days in American history, authorizing the forced removal and incarceration of over 120,000 individuals of Japanese descent, 2/3 of whom were U.S. citizens, denying them to the constitutional rights. And whereas the state of Washington has a unique and painful connection to this history, as thousands of Japanese Americans were uprooted from their homes, farms, businesses, and vibrant communities in Seattle, Auburn, Fife, Tacoma, and throughout the state. And
whereas Bainbridge Island became one of the first communities in the U.S. to experience forced removal under Executive Order 9066. The late Fumiko Hayashida, born on Bainbridge Island in 1911, became one of the first Japanese Americans to be incarcerated. An iconic photo of Fumiko, who was 31 years old, is holding her sleeping 13-month-old daughter, Natalie, while waiting to board a ferry from Bainbridge Island. On March 30th, 1942, Fumiko was among the 227 Japanese Americans forcibly removed from their homes. They were sent to the Manzanar Relocation Center in California before being transported to Minidoka Internment Camp in Idaho. Incarceration of Japanese Americans would last roughly 3 years, with most camps closing by late 1945 and the last camp, Tule Lake, closing in March of 1946. And whereas the Puyallup Assembly Center, euphemistically named Camp Harmony, was among 17 hastily constructed temporary detention sites established across the West Coast. Located in what is now the Washington State Fairgrounds, these centers were primarily used as staging areas before detainees were transported to more permanent camps. And
whereas, despite tremendous adversity, Japanese Americans demonstrated incredible resilience, contributing immeasurably to the nation both during the war effort and in the decades that followed, embodying the ideals of hope, perseverance, and patriotism. And whereas one such striking example of patriotism in the face of adversity was the service of the Japanese American Nisei, second generation veterans. Japanese Americans served throughout the theater of war and comprised the famed 442nd Regimental Combat Team, the 100th Infantry Battalion, which was the most decorated fighting unit in the United States military history who fought in Europe. And the Military Intelligence Service, the linguists who served in the Pacific and in the U.S., despite their families being incarcerated behind barbed wire. And whereas the lessons learned from Executive Order 9066 remain especially relevant today, as the injustices faced by marginalized groups demand our collective commitment to confronting prejudice, advancing equity and inclusion, and reaffirming our dedication to protecting civil liberties, equity, and justice, especially in times of crisis. And whereas last month, Nihonmachi Valley, a public exhibit space in Seattle's Chinatown International District, was defaced. The public art exhibit put on by the Wingwood Museum in part displays murals memorializing the incarceration of Japanese Americans. The iconic photo of Fumiko Hayashida holding her daughter Natalie is one of those murals. And
whereas the Port of Seattle honors the legacy of Japanese Americans in the Puget Sound region, recognizing their contributions to our cultural, economic, and social fabric while committing to fostering a future that upholds justice and the dignity of all. And whereas the Port of Seattle Commission denounces all acts of vandalism, harassment, intimidation, discrimination, or any other forms of bigotry against any and all individuals, and affirms the right of every individual to equal protection under the law. And whereas the Port of Seattle Commission solemnly acknowledges and commemorates February 19th, the Day of Remembrance, as a time of reflection on these injustices and as an opportunity to educate our community and ensure that such violations of rights are never repeated. And whereas in April 2023, the Port of Seattle Commission unanimously passed the Equity Policy Directive, institutionalizing equity, diversity, and inclusion as a central part of the organization and its work. And whereas the Port of Seattle Commission reaffirms the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion as core values of its mission and demonstrates unwavering and steadfast support of its Office of Equity, Diversion, and Inclusion, ensuring it remains fully supported and actively advancing its initiatives. Now, therefore, the Port of Seattle Commission hereby proclaims February 19th, 2025 as a day of remembrance for Japanese American incarceration and honors the resilience, dignity, and contributions of Japanese Americans in the face of injustice, committing to uphold equity and civil rights for all. Proclaimed by the Port of Seattle Commission this 11th day of February 2025. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dale, Kyle, and Irene, and Francis for the reading of the Day of Remembrance Proclamation. And thank you to my colleagues for entertaining it. If you'll afford me the personal privilege of leading on remarks. My great-grandfather, Yoshinobu, worked on a ship. He traveled by sea between Japan and America several times before finally deciding to disembark and set down roots in Seattle in search for better work. He sent for a picture bride, my great-grandmother, Sen, and together they built something from nothing, a brighter future for themselves and for their 4 children who were born in Seattle as American citizens. My grandfather, Hiroshi, my auntie Naoko, Uncle Yukio, and Uncle Yukinao. My great-grandma Sen passed too early in childbirth with my Uncle Yukinao when my grandfather was just 6 years old. As a single father, my great-grandfather worked tirelessly to provide for his family, but he was poor. He heavily relied upon the Japanese Baptist Church located at the end of Broadway near Yesler. That church became my grandfather and his siblings' refuge. It's where they lived and where they slept on the ground and where the women of the congregation helped raise him in absence of my great-grandmother. They are even able to finally, according to the census, find a place where they could stay on their own by the time he was in high school. On February 19th, 1942, President Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066, and the Western Defense Command issued a notice to all people of Japanese ancestry requiring them to report to assembly centers. They were told they were being evacuated for their own safety. They were given short notice to make whatever arrangements they could for their belongings, and they were instructed to pack only what they could carry. And so began the forced removal of over 120,000 people of Japanese ancestry. Most of them were children. Bank accounts were frozen. Assets were seized. Interracial couples were separated. Their animals, their belongings, abandoned. My grandma and my grandpa at the time were teenagers at Broadway High School, which we know today as Seattle Central Community College. On February 19th, 1942, Japanese American students made up 25% of its student body. But by April, that number was 0. And everything that my great-grandfather had worked for was gone. They were transported en masse to the Puyallup Assembly Center, euphemistically named Camp Harmony. It's what you now recognize today as the Puyallup Fairgrounds. You have lovely memories of that place. But what it was horsebacks and mud. From there, after a time, they were shipped further inland, isolated from the word, out of sight and out of mind. It was dehumanizing. They slept in horse stalls instead of paved walkways, mud, at Minidoka, dust. They were fed food unfit for human consumption, fit for prisoners of war. And they were denied dignity, left with nothing but holes in the ground and makeshift barriers to serve as their only semblance of privacy. And they were surrounded by all sides, by barbed wire fences. Watchtowers loomed over heads, staffed with armed guards. Their weapons were pointed inwards. And yet each day the incarcerees, my grandparents included, would stand and recite the Pledge of Allegiance, dutifully declaring, with liberty and justice for all. No crime was committed, no trial or due process, but the resistance that took place within the camps was great. It looked like Gordon Hirabayashi openly defying internment, turning himself into the FBI for breaking curfew. He invited jail time and prosecution in order to challenge the legality of the order in the landmark case Hirabayashi versus the United States. Resistance looked like no-no boys who answered to their loyalty questionnaires in defiance. No, I will not serve in the U.S. Army. And no, I will not forego allegiance to the emperor who never had my loyalty to begin with. And it looked like the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, the segregated unit of Japanese-American soldiers who heroically broke the Gothic line in Italy and became the most decorated battalion in U.S. history. They fought for America's ideals even as their families were denied those very ideals back home behind barbed wire. And it looked like incarcerees inside, creating beauty despite their captivity. Art, baseball fields, crops, forming communities, deepening their faith. Years passed before the gates finally opened, and they were allowed to return home. The mass incarceration of Japanese Americans has since been acknowledged as a grave injustice, one that resulted from what historians refer to as a failure of political leadership. And the rallying cry of the Japanese American community became, never again. Densho former executive director Tom Ikeda once said, "History does not repeat itself, but it does rhyme." Last week, at my daughter's daycare, I noticed a posting inside the door that said ICE agents may not enter without proof of a warrant. It struck me that the fear that our communities live in today is real and it's immediate. The very tangible possibility that an agent could enter a classroom and take away a 4-year-old. We understand that racism, xenophobia, and intolerance are the seeds of harmful political action. And we understand what that looks like in its present day of forced removal, indefinite detention, denial of due process. We recognize what this looks like. And that's why the Day of Remembrance is not just about reflecting. It's a call to action, one that compels us to learn from our lessons so that they won't be repeated today and not into the future.
Oh, you're
Back to the lock.
yeah.
Sorry.
Hot mic, someone needs to turn off their mic online. I'd like to thank our presenters, and I'd like to thank my colleagues. And most of all, I'd like to thank all the people day in, day out, in a systemic level, but also in the very front lines. Something as simple as a daycare, who the provider's very job is to keep our children safe and healthy, are doing the work to protect our communities. Thank you. Commissioner.
Who wants to follow that up?
Happy to. Commissioner Mohammed.
Well, first, I just would like to start by thanking the speakers for sharing your powerful words as well, and reading the proclamation, and for everyone who worked on it. And I want to thank Commission President Hasegawa for your words, for your reflection. I feel like anytime you bring a proclamation forward, it's almost a history lesson. And I just appreciate the thought that goes into how you bring these proclamations forward. And I appreciate your voice on this commission. Your voices as a collective remind us why this history must never be forgotten and why our commitment to justice must be unwavering. So I thank you, Commission President Hasegawa, for bringing this proclamation forward and for ensuring that we honor the past while taking action for a more just future. And I'll just say, like, in light of all of the geopolitical conflicts unfolding around the world and even here at home, this is a moment that serves as a critical reminder of our responsibility to stand for justice, inclusion, and the protection of all communities. And at the port, we do reaffirm our commitment to stand against discrimination and exclusion in all its forms, period. And I want to make it very clear for both the listening public, for the port staff, and everyone that we are prepared to defend our values as a port, to defend the values of equity, inclusion, and justice for all, always. And so again, I thank you for bringing this proclamation forward, and thank all those who worked on it.
Commissioner Fellman.
Commissioner Cho gets to play cleanup. I very much appreciate the speakers and President Hasegawa for leading this effort and helping us understand where we've been so that we know where we're going and avoid making similar mistakes in the future. The rally of Never Forget is very analogous to the Holocaust Remembrance Day of Never Again. And it's interesting to note that while Holocaust Remembrance Day was the 27th, where 2/3 of the European Jewish population was exterminated, and the February 23rd is the Chinese Expulsion Remembrance Day. So it seems like nobody's beyond discrimination. And I think the fact that, perhaps we should be talking about, paying attention now, and the dehumanization of people, the idea that we could displace Gazans or Greenlanders, the idea that we're even talking about things like this. If we don't pay attention now, we are only going to suffer these same mistakes again. I am greatly appreciative. I know that Kyle has participated in the Asian Jewish Alliance work that I've attended, and these unlikely coalitions are needed more than ever right now. And I hope that persists as things continue to heighten in it the discriminatory behaviors that are continuing to occur here and around the world. So thank you for reminding us of all this, and never again.
Commissioner Cho.
Thank you, President Hasegawa, and thank you to our guests today for taking the time to come to us and read the proclamation. The Day of Remembrance has a special place in my heart, not because I'm Japanese American, but because, I worked for Senator Bob Hasegawa in the State Senate. And I had the great fortune of organizing the Day of Remembrance for 2 years when I was working for Senator Hasegawa. When the NVC and Densho and all these amazing members of the community came, it allowed me to really connect with leaders and those who continue to take the mantle of Never Forget. And in fact, I was reflecting back on the last time I organized Day of Remembrance, and I remember meeting Sheikh Tenagi, who I think at the time was around 95, and I had this opportunity we always break bread afterwards and talk to him. And the 100th Infantry Battalion was the most decorated battalion in U.S. history, in military history, and I remember asking him, what do you think motivated you all to fight so hard? And he said, we had to prove ourselves. We had to prove ourselves as Americans. And that hit me because I remember my late mentor, Norm Mineta, who was, not in the 442, or he was too young at the time. But even after retirement, I remember Norm would always wear an American flag on his lapel of his suits. And I remember asking him, man, you're always wearing that American flag on your lapel. And I remember his response being, because I feel like I always have to, prove myself and show that I'm just as American as anyone else. And that was a remnant of his experience as a child, being thrown into the incarceration camps. And so this phenomenon of being a perpetual foreigner or not American enough continues to be something that we as minorities in this country continue to deal with and fight through. Obviously, As a son of immigrants, my parents continue to fight this, and sometimes I'm asked where I'm from too. But if going down the path of history, if you don't mind, when we talk about the Day of Remembrance and the Nisei veterans and the 442, there's one aspect of that history that I love to remind my community, the Korean American community, and that is of a colonel in the U.S. Army named Young-Ok Kim. And I'm seeing some head nods, so I'm sure some of you may know Young-Ok Kim. But Young-Ok Kim was a second-generation Korean American. He was born in Los Angeles. And he was placed in the 100th Infantry Battalion of the 442. And as a Korean, the Army actually realizing that he was actually Korean and not Japanese, he was offered a transfer. And he responded, he actually rejected the transfer. And he said, there are no Japanese nor Koreans here. We're all Americans and we're fighting for the same cause. And so he chose to stay with the 100th and the 442 and fought valiantly beside the Japanese. And that spirit of oneness, e pluribus unum, out of many one, is our motto as a country, but that's who we are as a country, as a people. E pluribus unum, out of many one. That is diversity. That is diversity. And it's super disheartening for us to see that diversity, equity, inclusion is being attacked in today's climate politics. Because we all know that is what makes America exceptional. That is what makes America, America. And look, I think we live in the greatest country in the world, full stop. But the experience of the Japanese Americans is proof that we are not perfect, that we don't always get it right, whether it's on a national level or even at a commission level, and that we are an experiment, and that the 442, the incarceration of Japanese Americans, and the reminder of and the recognition of the Day of Remembrance serves as a sober reminder that we're still working on it, and that each day we'll work. And I'm just grateful to my colleagues here. Thank you, Commissioner Hasegawa, for your leadership. Thank you for continuing to run with the torch of those who came before us as an example of what can happen, what should never happen again, and what we're fighting for. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. I'm wondering if there's a motion on the floor to adopt the proclamation. The motion's so moved.
Second.
Been made by Commissioner Mohammed and seconded by Commissioner Cho. Are there any further comments? Seeing none, Clerk Hart, please call the roll for the vote.
Thank you. Beginning with Commissioner Cho.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Felleman.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Mohammed.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Hasegawa.
Aye.
Thank you. 4 ayes, 0 nays for this item.
Gambatte. Thank you all. And that brings us to the next item on our agenda, which is the Executive Director's Report. Executive Director Metrick, you have the floor.
President Hasegawa, Commissioners, good afternoon. Following that very appropriate proclamation about the upcoming Day of Remembrance and our commitment to equity, justice, and protection of civil liberties for all, I want to start by acknowledging that February is also Black History Month. At the Port of Seattle, we celebrate the achievements and history of African Americans annually, and this year we celebrate African Americans in labor. Through our celebrations, we're focusing on a quote from A. Philip Randolph, the labor and civil rights leader who founded the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, a black union, and helped organize the March on Washington in 1963. He says, and I quote, "Equality is the heart and essence of democracy, freedom and justice, equality of opportunity in industry and labor unions, schools and colleges, government, politics, and before the law." And this is how we strive to do our work here at the Port of Seattle. For example, on the side of inclusion, recently, at the recently concluded Seattle Boat Show at Lumen Field, our Maritime Division sponsored 6 different port guest organizations. Providing dedicated exhibit booth space on the shore floor gave us an opportunity to provide underserved boating programs that would have not otherwise been included in the boat show. The sponsored organization included Seaster, which creates inclusive access to waterborne activities and future tides, an independent news organization for the Pacific Northwest waterways. Other port guests included the Corinthian Yacht Club Youth Sailing, Anacortes Waterfront Alliance, Sisters in Action Sports, Seafair Volunteers, and Port Anti-Human Trafficking Team. I have a few additional community engagements also to announce going forward. We are hosting 4 upcoming information sessions for our South King County Fund Economic Opportunities for Communities program. This program supports economic opportunity within the port area, and information sessions take place in February 12th, 13th, 19th, and the 26th in Tukwila, Kent, at the Ports Duwamish Community Hub, and online. More information is on the events section of the Port of Seattle's website. Staying with community updates, tomorrow, February 12th, the SEA Stakeholder Advisory Roundtable, START, holds a state policy advocacy day in Olympia. We plan to build on the success of the START DC fly-in in 2023, which led to the 4 airport city priorities being included in the 2024 FAA Reauthorization Act. As with the federal advocacy effort, we believe that this is the first time an airport sponsor has worked with local communities to help advocate for shared aircraft noise and emissions policies at the state level. Representatives from each of the 6 airport cities, including 6 elected officials, will be attending. This includes Burien, Des Moines, Federal Way, Normandy Park, Sea-Tac, and Tukwila. I also want to highlight another upcoming community event. On Saturday, March 1st, from 10 a.m. to 12:30 p.m., we invite the public to join port staff and partners as we plant 300 native trees and shrubs near the city of Sea-Tac Pac West Little League fields. Ongoing maintenance projects like this are very popular and increase tree canopy and improve the ecosystem diversity. To conclude our community updates, I want to thank you, Commissioners, and to recognize the External Relations team for a successful State of the Port breakfast last week. We're well on track to having a record-setting event in terms of attendance. We had over 400 that RSVP'd, but the inclement weather put a little damper on that. But we still, even in that weather, we still had over 309 attendees. So I appreciated the remarks from each of you, sharing our vision for the port for the future and your time during our planning, and also for your time during our training retreat that followed. Before turning to today's meeting, I have a few updates on issues that have been in the news. First, I want to recognize that the Aviation Division for their work managing both the inclement weather last week as well as the airfield collision of 2 aircraft in the taxiway between the South Concourse and the South Aviation hangars. And I want to thank those teams at the Aviation Division for staying ready, prepared, and focused for whatever could happen. Finally, at my last Executive Director report, I shared that our staff and industry partners continue tracking news out of the Trump administration that may impact port operations or programs. Many employees and partners are asking if the port has been impacted by the federal funding freeze, which is now under a court-ordered withdrawal. At this point, we are not aware of any examples of missed payments to the port. We are asking our staff to closely track any issues raised by federal employees that interact with the port about leaving the workforce or changes to programs or policy. As this is a rapidly evolving situation and we'll continue to monitor this. Our employees and members of the community are also asking if changes related to immigration policy and enforcement impact the Port of Seattle. As one of the largest international airports in the country, we serve people from all over the world. And our employees and the 20,000 plus workers at SEA represent many different cultures, countries, and communities. Our rich diversity makes us stronger here in the port. Last month, the port's police department conducted a refresher training for their officers on immigration policies in the state's Keep Washington Working law. As they do this every year, Our number one priority is the safety of the people that we serve. We have a long history of supporting immigrants and refugees and making SEA a welcoming, inclusive gateway to the Pacific Northwest in our nation. This is an issue that we take seriously and is something that the Port of Seattle will continue to prioritize in our work. If there's one thing that the Port of Seattle staff have become if there's one thing that the Port of Seattle staff they've become very good over the past few years, and that is adjusting to new and challenging situations, and we'll continue to do that. I'm confident that we'll be able to continue to make progress on our strategic priorities and our values. Moving to today's commission meeting, I want to highlight a few items on our agenda. We're always looking for ways to enhance safety in our operations, and on our consent agenda, we have an action related to designing a virtual ramp tower. This innovative technology is currently only deployed at a few airports across the country. Once constructed, the virtual ramp tower will integrate with existing systems and data feeds to create more efficient and safer operations, such as using infrared cameras to be able to see planes at low visibility conditions. We also have an order on childcare and briefings on our local and regional policy priorities, as well as our Pacific Northwest to Alaska Green Corridor project. While there are 62 Green Corridor initiatives around the world, the Pacific Northwest to Alaska project is the only one focused on cruising and one of the first initiated of all the Green Corridors. We're very proud that the Port of Seattle is playing such a critical role in developing and advancing this project. I'm pleased to say that across the board, the industries we work with remain committed to their transition to clean fuels. What I find when meeting with leaders in red and blue states and outside of the United States is that whether you are motivated by reducing emissions or increasing energy independence, energy security, or innovation, the transition to clean energy alternatives is viewed as a necessary step for our resilience and competitiveness in the future. That is certainly the Port's perspective, but it's been reassuring to see it shared so universally across the industries and geographies. I'll have more to say about these items during their introductions. Commissioners, thank you. That concludes my remarks.
Thank you, Executive Director Metrick. Commissioners, do you have any questions for the Executive Director? Seeing none, we are now at committee reports, which will be introduced by Erica Chung, Commission's Strategic Advisor.
Good afternoon, President Asagawa, Commissioners, Executive Director Metrick. I have one committee report for you today. On Tuesday, February 4th, Commission President Hasagawa and Commissioner Mohammed convened the AV Workforce Conditions Ad Hoc Committee, where they reviewed the Child Care Feasibility Navigator Order. With the inclusion of citing and leveraging its existing state and local programs language, the committee recommends the order for commission action at today's commission meeting later today. Thank you. This concludes my report.
Thank you, Erica. Thank you, Erica. Are there any follow-up questions for commissioners regarding committee reports? Seeing none, we will continue on our agenda to public comment. The Commission welcomes public comment as an important part of the public process. Comments are received and considered by the Commission in its deliberations. Before we take public comment, we're going to review the rules for in-person and virtual comment. So, Clerk Hart, please play the recorded rules.
The Port of Seattle Commission welcomes you to our meeting today. As noted, public comment is an important part of the public process, and the Port of Seattle Commission thanks you for joining us. Before proceeding, we will overview the rules governing public comment for your general information. Each speaker will have 2 minutes to speak unless otherwise revised by the presiding officer for the purposes of meeting efficiency, and the speaker shall keep their remarks within the allotted time provided. A timer will appear on the screen, and a buzzer will sound at the end of the speaker's comment period. The Commission accepts comments on items appearing on its agenda and items related to the conduct of port business. The presiding officer will ask speakers to limit their comments to these topics. This rule applies to both introductory and concluding remarks. Disruptions of Commission public meetings are prohibited. General disruptions include, but are not limited to, the following: speaking before being recognized by the presiding officer, holding or placing banners and signs in the meeting room in a way that endangers others or obstructs the flow of people or view of others at the meeting, intentionally disrupting, disturbing, or otherwise impeding attendance or participation at a meeting, refusing to follow the direction of the presiding officer or security personnel, attempting to use the comment time for purposeful delay without conveying a discernible message, using the comment period to assist in the campaign for election of any person to any office or for the promotion of or opposition to any ballot proposition except when addressing action being taken by the Commission on a ballot proposition appearing on its agenda, directing public comments to the audience, engaging in abusive or harassing behavior, including but not limited to derogatory remarks based on age, race, color, national origin, ancestry, religion, disability, pregnancy, sex, gender, sexual orientation, transgender status, marital status, or any other category protected by law, the use of obscene or profane language and gestures, assaults or other threatening behavior, and sexual misconduct or sexual harassment. For safety purposes, individuals are asked not to physically approach commissioners or staff at the meeting table during the meeting. Individuals may provide written public comment before or after the meeting, and in addition, speakers may offer written materials to the Commission clerk for distribution during their testimony to the Commission. A detailed list of the public comment rules is available through the Commission clerk. If a meeting is disrupted by an individual in attendance in the meeting room or by an individual providing public comment in person or virtually, the port will impose progressive consequences that may result in exclusion from future meetings. Written materials provided to the clerk will be included in today's meeting record. The clerk has a list of those prepared to speak. When your name is called, please come to the testimony table or unmute yourself if joining virtually. Repeat your name for the record and state your topic related to an item on the agenda or related to the conduct of port business. For those joining virtually, when you have concluded your remarks, please turn off your camera and mute your microphone. Our public comment period will now commence. Thank you again for joining us today.
Thank you, recorded voice. Clerk Hart, please take us through public comment. We'll start with in-person and then go virtual.
Thank you. Beginning with in-person, I have Tom Johnson. I'll pick you up. So please go ahead and restate your name for the record, Tom, and the item or topic related to port business you want to talk about.
I'm Tom Johnson, and I am here to speak in support of agenda item 8K.
Welcome. Floor is yours.
Thank you. Top, scroll. Good afternoon, President Hasegawa, Commissioners, and ED Metric. My name is Tom Johnson, and I'm a member of the Port's Transgender Inclusivity Employee Resource Group. I've come on my own time today to speak in support of the proposed federal legislative agenda item, 8K. I urge you to adopt it, and then quickly to mount a strong, united, and very, very public defense of the Port's raise values and century agenda. Today's item lays out how much the Port's constituents need it to be a leading voice on free travel, speech, immigration, and medical care, and to join its constituents to fight against the anti-blackness, transphobia, Islamophobia, anti-Asian, and immigrant bashing that animates so many recent federal actions. We Port employees were relieved by recent internal messages to and from executive leadership expressing strong support and commitment around these values. Don't all Port constituents deserve this same relief and reassurance that we received internally? Area employers, workers, and voters need to know the Port has their backs now when there's so much temptation to cave in advance to the federal bluster. As an example, look at Seattle Children's Hospital, a local institution whose leadership recently threw their own gender clinic patients, their families, and staff under the bus by canceling gender-affirming medical care in an admitted attempt to curry perceived federal favor. Now, the Port of Seattle is stronger than that and better than that. My time working among you has taught me this, and everyone in the region deserves to know it too. And the Port has the external relations team to help make it happen. When the Port decided to mount a defense of industrial zoning recently, leadership moved like lightning to develop and deliver public commentary to the press and to gather constituent allies to develop a joint public letter that it broadcast widely. Leaders moved fast because they believed the Port's constituents deserved to see them suit up and show up. Today's proclamation reminded me how the brutal World War II Japanese-American incarceration experiences found their groundwork in powerful local white business leaders who gained and held the ears of, among others, the Governor Art Langley, a former Seattle mayor. These leaders had lobbied and agitated for years for the expulsion of all Asian Americans from our region and expropriation of their property. The war was the excuse these forces needed, not their cause, and such forces are again at the ready today. Today's item 8K shows how much the port's broad constituency deserves to see its full public energy brought to bear around these federal issues. I can tell you that employee resource group members across all the port's line of business stand ready to help. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Clerk Hart, go ahead and invite our next speaker.
Thank you. Our next speaker from our team's call is Aaron Brakel. Aaron, if you're joining us by telephone, *6 to unmute. Otherwise, please restate your name for the record and the agenda item or topic you'd like to speak about related to the conduct of port business.
Yes, this is Aaron Brakel. Can you hear me?
We can.
Hi, thank you very much. My name is Aaron Brakel. I am the Clean Water Campaigns Manager for the Southeast Alaska Conservation Council. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with the Port Commission today. My comments are about item 11A, the Pacific Northwest Alaska Green Corridor, and the scope of the fuel use baseline work that is currently underway. I'm addressing you from on land on Tlingit, Ani, in Pinwell, Alaska. Southeast Alaska Conservation Council has been working to protect the lands and waters of Southeast Alaska for over 50 years. I grew up in downtown Juneau and have had a front row seat to the growth of the cruise industry in our port since 1970, and my son lives in Seattle. As an organization, we do not have a public position at this time on the Green Corridor. We are, however, strongly opposed to the use of heavy fuel oil and scrubbers. Through its tariff provisions, the Port of Seattle has acknowledged the environmental harms of scrubber waste discharge and has prohibited scrubber discharges from vessels at berth. In support of the International Maritime Organization direction to get shipping to net zero by 2050, the baseline for the Pacific Northwest to Alaska Green Corridor should include the full Alaska cruise ship route, not just the first mover ports in Southeast Alaska. It should include all ocean-going cruise vessels that depart from Seattle and Vancouver with Alaska stops. This will help to clarify the parameters for this larger net zero objective for cruise ships departing your port in the Alaska trade. The baseline should include each type of fuel used and the volume of each fuel used, including heavy fuel oil, marine gas oil, ultra-low sulfur diesel, liquid natural gas, and any other fuel used. Specifically, the baseline should identify how many vessels use heavy fuel oil and how many use 0.1% sulfur emission control area compliant fuel and how much heavy fuel oil is used, and each type of fuel. Thank you very much for the opportunity to provide this comment today.
Thank you, Aaron. Can you introduce the next speaker?
Yes, our next speaker from the room is Sally Andrews. Sally, please go ahead and repeat your name for the record and your agenda item or topic related to the conduct of port business you wish to speak about, please.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Sally Andrews. I'm a Vice President for Cruise Lines International Association, or CLIA. My comments today are in support of Agenda Item 11A, the Pacific Northwest to Alaska Green Corridor. I'm here today representing our member cruise lines, many of whom are first movers in this initiative. First, I want to acknowledge all those who are participating in evaluating this opportunity. Assessing the feasibility of a green corridor is a true collaboration between the public and private sector. Maritime decarbonization is challenging, layered, and complex, covering many aspects including the availability of alternative fuels, how fuels are delivered and bunkered, cruise ship technical considerations, cost, and more. And while there's no quick fix, the Green Corridor collaboration represents a desire to work together on finding solutions. I wanted to take this opportunity to recognize the leadership of the Port of Seattle staff in their role in stewarding this project. They have done a lot of heavy lifting. I will come up short trying to identify everyone. I do, however, serve on the stakeholder working group and want to acknowledge the hardworking colleagues from the port, Ryan Childs, Melissa Parks, Rosie Courtney, and Linda Springman for their hard work. CLIA member cruise lines are actively pursuing net zero emissions by 2050 2050, consistent with the International Maritime Organization's 2023 strategy for GHG reduction. The industry is making significant investments in sustainable technologies, including alternative fuel development, energy sources, and shore power. A growing number of alternative fuel-capable new builds are entering the fleet, which will reduce emissions significantly by using fuels such as methanol and LNG. Additionally, many of these new builds are being designed with fuel flexibility in mind to enable a transition to low and zero-emission fuels when they become available at scale. Pilot programs continue to test and improve sustainable fuel technologies. We look forward to keeping you updated this year and the upcoming cruise season, which is in 59 days. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker from the room is Nick Longo. Nick, please go ahead and repeat your name for the record and your agenda item or topic related to the conduct of port business, please.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Nick Longo. I'm here speaking in support of Agenda Item AK. My name is Nick Longo. I'm a port employee, an immigrant, and a member of the LGBTQ plus community, and a gay father. I work as a planner in the Aviation Capital Program and Planning Group, and I help lead two employee resource groups. One is VOICE, the Voice of Immigrants Committed to Equity, that is the employee resource group for immigrants, refugees, and allies, and the other one is the Transgender Inclusivity Group. I'm also a former recipient of the Charles Blood Champion of Diversity Award. Today, I speak not just for myself, but for many of my colleagues who are deeply concerned about the growing threats to equity and inclusion. Immigrants, refugees, transgender people are among the first to be targeted by the ordinances, recent ordinances, but we know they will not be the last ones. The port has long been a leader of justice, inclusion, and equity, and we need the leadership now more than ever. People are scared, and our employee resource groups want to be a true source of support. We trust that the port will stay true to its values and the goals of the Century Agenda, even if these new ordinances are creating chaos and challenges. Sometimes it seems to be in conflict with our values and goals. So if the Commission, as I think it is, working on anything to support employees, we, the Seattle Port Employee Resource Groups, want to collaborate and want to be part of the conversation. We appreciate your leadership. We are confident that you will continue to be compassionate, bold, and proactive in standing with employees and supporting employee resource groups like ours. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker, Madam Commission President, is Norman Melendez.
Welcome, Norman.
And Norman, please go ahead and repeat your name for the record and your topic. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm privileged to be here. Good afternoon, commissioners, executive directors, present here, also my colleagues at the Port of Seattle. Good afternoon. I'm Norman Melendez, working for the Port. I'm here to represent the Voice ERG and Happy ERG. Like my colleague mentioned, Nick Longo, we want to have like affirmation from the commissioners for the support of our immigrants at the Port of Seattle. We at the Voice ERG represent immigration at the port, and it seems each ERG group at the port is being touched or being led, and members of those ERGs are immigrants. So most of us right now is kind of scared and wanting support from the commissioners and for our executive leaders to support us in our goal to have like a safe and a secure environment as we work for the Port of Seattle. And thank you for this opportunity again, and have a good day.
Thank you, Norman.
Our next speaker from the room is Stefan Moritz. Stefan, please go ahead and repeat your name for the record and your agenda item or topic related to the conduct of port business, please.
Good afternoon, members of the Commission, ED Metric. My name is Stefan Moritz. I'm with Unite Here Local 8, the Union of Hospitality Workers in Washington and Oregon. I'm here to talk about childcare and the agenda item related to that today. First, I do want to say, though, I want to second what the previous speakers have said about the political environment that we live in. And our members who, many of them are immigrants, come from BIPOC communities, feel the threat of what is going on a national level very acutely. And so I think the port as a community, I think it's a great opportunity to support people across those lines, whether it's who they work for, whether it's the contractor or the port, where they come from, and what communities they are a part of. So on childcare, I want to thank you all for taking up this issue, Commission President Hasegawa for reaching out and having a conversation with us about this. Our members work from very, very early in the morning to very late at night, get to the airport many different ways and face a lot of challenges in being able to secure the quality, affordable childcare that they need so they can actually serve the airport and the Port of Seattle in the way that they do every day. And so removing those barriers to folks, I think, is important for people both from a affordability perspective. Like, all of our members struggle to make ends meet in this, increasingly expensive region of ours. But I think it also poses challenges to the employers that our members work for, right? To be able to staff and have an environment where people can both make a living and also support their families. And so this issue is really important, and I think I really want to commend how you are approaching this from multiple angles and try to make a difference here. So we're here to be part of this process, and whenever there's any questions or any way we can support, we will be there. So thank you.
Thank you, Stefan. I'm loving the mutual support in the room right now. Everybody's so affirming. For those online, everybody keeps applauding for all the speakers who come up, and it's great. That's it for people who signed up in advance. Do we have anybody else in the room who did not sign up in advance that would like to be clapped for by the whole room? Is there anybody online who'd like to address the commission that did not sign up in advance? All right, seeing none, then that brings us forward. And Clerk Hart, you can give us a synopsis of any written comments that we received.
Just one moment here. Thank you, Madam Commission President, members of the Commission, Executive Director Metric. We've received 2 written comments for the meeting today. These have been previously distributed to the Commission for your information and will become a part of the meeting record. Both pertain to item 11A on the agenda. The first comes from Iris Antman, who speaks to the green corridor and complications that come with the use of green methanol, noting that it is toxic and is a safety issue due to its explosive nature. She notes that mega cruises will never be green, and it is time to reduce and phase out cruising to Alaska as an economic driver. Peggy Prince states that green methanol is not a climate-wise solution, and the substance is produced from fossil fuels and therefore is not a net zero carbon product. She also notes the toxic flammable nature of the fuel and that methanol fuel tanks are 2.5 times larger than oil tanks. She closes her statements by stating that the only viable way to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the Salish Sea is to curtail cruise traffic. And that concludes the written comments we've received today.
Thank you very much, Clerk Hart. So at this point, our next order of business is the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda are considered routine and will be adopted by one motion. Items removed from the consent agenda will be considered separately immediately after adoption of the remaining consent agenda items. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda covering items 8A through N.
So moved.
Second.
The motion has been made by Commissioner Cho and seconded by Commissioner Fellman. Commissioners, please say aye or nay when your name's called for approval of the consent agenda.
Beginning with Commissioner Cho.
Aye.
Thank you, Commissioner Pellman.
Aye.
Thank you, Commissioner Mohammed.
Aye.
Thank you, Commissioner Hasagawa.
Aye.
Thank you. 4 ayes, 0 nays for this item.
Thank you very much. The motion carries. And moving on, we have one new business item. Clerk Hart, please read it into the record, and Executive Director Metrick will introduce it.
Thank you. Multitasking. This is Agenda Item 10A, Order Number 2025-04, an order directing the Executive Director to conduct a feasibility study for increasing child care access that is accessible, affordable, and/or flexible for SEA workers, and to establish the Child Care Navigator pilot program for Seattle-Tacoma International Airport.
Commissioners, as one of the busiest airports in the country, SCA operates in a complex regulatory environment with a 24/7 workforce of over 2,200 employees. A stable workforce is essential to maintaining seamless operations, and yet the nationwide child care crisis is having a direct impact on our airport employers and workers. Child care access and affordability remain significant barriers to workforce stability. This issue can affect employee retention, attendance, and job productivity across our operations. Today's order addresses some of these issues through the feasibility of developing a child care center and the creation of a technical assistance program. The presenter this afternoon is Eric Schenfeld, the Senior Manager in Federal and International Government Relations and a big Philadelphia Eagles fan. So.
I was going to sing Fly Eagles Fly, but I think probably that's not the time or place. Meet me in the lobby afterwards. And we'll score a touchdown, 1, 2, 3.
Focus, thanks.
Sorry, yes. Commissioners, he distracted me. Blame the Executive Director. Good afternoon, Commissioners and Executive Director Metrick. My name is Eric Schenfeld, Senior Manager of Federal and International Government Relations for the Port of Seattle, and here today to present this order on child care opportunity and access for SEA workers. Let me start, before I talk about the substance of this, I want to really thank everyone for all of the work that has come before that brought us to here today. Of course, commissioners, including Commission President Hasagawa and Commissioner Mohammed, but also Julie Collins, who has led this work up until recently, Bukta Khaizar, who is our Director of Office of Equity and Diversity and Inclusion, so many other people who have helped to bring this work to where it is right now, including over the last year, developing a study to look at what our options are for increasing access for SEA workers to affordable, accessible, and flexible childcare. As Executive Director Metrick said, this is not an issue for us of wouldn't it be nice to have childcare for airport workers. This is not an issue of, what a thoughtful thing to do. We are the owner and operator of one of the biggest and most complex airports in the country, Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, and we need that airport to be successful in all of the ways we need it to be successful. We need the infrastructure to work, we need the systems to work, the technology to work, and probably most importantly, we need workers to work. We need to have the approximately 22,000 people who come to work every day at our airport to be able to hire those folks and retain those folks. And we know in the 21st century that one of the key drivers of our ability to attract and retain a high-quality workforce is accessible childcare. So many people we have heard directly from employers and employees at the airport cannot come work at our airport, which is not proximate to sufficient childcare, certainly not proximate to sufficient accessible, affordable, flexible childcare. And so we really have a lack of ability to truly attract and retain the best quality workforce at this airport. And so this order today builds, like I said, on the work that has been done over the past year or two to really figure out how we get to that point. And the way I like to think about this order is it is sort of a short-term solution and a longer-term solution. That short-term solution, as you'll see here in this order, is the development of a child care navigator program. That will be a program that offers employees hands-on, fully comprehensive, in-language and culturally appropriate support to identify not only existing openings in child care facilities, but also other resources that can help them afford that. What are the subsidies? What are the tax credits? What are the ways that we can help you actually apply for slots at these existing child care facilities so that we can take advantage of what already exists? And so we're really excited to move forward with that program. This order authorizes us to identify a consultant or consultants to help us offer those services to workers at SEA. We know, though, that no matter how much child care navigator support we offer, that is not going to solve the problem because there simply are not enough open child care slots. There are not enough qualified child care workers to serve the demands of our facility. And so we need to take that longer-term approach as well, which is ultimately the development of a child care center, a physical child care center at or near SEA. We have identified that need, we have identified that opportunity, but of course, that is an incredibly complicated proposition. And so we are proposing to conduct a feasibility study. In fact, you are directing us to conduct a feasibility study through this order that would really help us figure out how do we get there from here. What are the operational models? What are the potential partnerships? What are the financial modeling that we need to understand about how to make this truly affordable and accessible? And I think one of the most important things that this feasibility study will identify is going back to those employers at SEA, going back to those employees and truly understanding the demand, truly understanding the need and how the lack of childcare is affecting our ability to attract that workforce, and what are the solutions in specific, at what price point, where, how does this work, when, is it 24/7, is it during the regular work days? All of these questions that are going to make ultimately this child care center fully successful, we need to lay the groundwork now with data, with research, and with that real sort of consumer demand research. So those are the two things that this order is directing staff to do. The short-term, and when I say short-term child care navigator, that navigator program will exist forever, but that is sort of something we can do in the near term to start this process. And then that feasibility study, which we will conduct ASAP, that will eventually lead, hopefully in the next year or two or three, to the start of that physical child care center. Those are the two things that are in this order. The last thing I will say about this order is that, of course, we want to make sure that all of this work is accountable, and we are building in accountability into this process, regular reports to the Commission on our progress. The RFPs themselves will have very specific metrics of what we consider success to be in terms of the Child Care Navigator program, how it measures success, how many people it serves, do those people actually find long-term solutions for childcare, and then, of course, all of the metrics that are in the feasibility study to be able to finalize that report and then figure out next steps from there. So with that, Commissioners, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today, and happy to answer any questions about this order.
Thank you very much, Eric, for the presentation without any notes, I might add, and on your ongoing work to get this body of work to where it is today. So, Commissioners, before we jump into Q&A and comments, is there a motion on the floor?
So moved.
I'll second.
The motion has been made by Commissioner Mohammed and seconded by Commissioner Cho. And with that, I will open the floor for comments and questions from my colleagues. Commissioner Mohammed.
Thank you, Commission President Hasegawa, Eric, Mr. Metrick. Thank you for your comments that you made today. I want to thank Commission President Hasegawa for bringing this item forward. It's an honor to co-sponsor this order with you. But I remember when the first day that you joined the port, child care facilities was one of your top priorities. And so I just appreciate how thoughtful you've been in bringing this forward. If you read the order, what you'll notice is that this order explores multiple options for expanding access to affordable and accessible childcare. You weren't locked into just getting something done, but doing it in the most thoughtful way, bringing forward an order that looked at how to study this before we got to where we are today. And so I just want to recognize that and appreciate your leadership. One of the things that is in this order is leveraging existing state and local programs. I want to call out programs that are offered through the Washington State Department of Child, Youth, and Family Services, DCYF. I know that there are so many community members who provide child care services, who participate in those programs, and who are looking for opportunities to welcome folks who work on our facilities and would love to have their children part of those programs. And so, Eric, you talked about those short-term solutions. That is one of those short-term solutions, and I hope that we can explore that and see if there's opportunities for us to make the appropriate connections. Both Mr. Metrick and Eric both talked about the importance of bringing this forward really is centered around maintaining a strong and well-trained workforce has been a top priority for the port, and that includes being able to support our tenants and their employees that operate at our facility, and this is obviously one of the ways to do that. And this issue has been a priority for this commission. We have a track record for supporting child care initiatives. If you guys remember, in January 24 of 2023, the Port Commission did pass an amendment to add child care advocacy to the Port of Seattle's legislative agenda. We supported a number of House bills, House Bill 1199 that passed, that ensured that child care facilities is more accessible, and people who are living in condominiums that are designed as single-family homes can operate child care centers out of their homes in that kind of way. And so I just appreciate that this has been a priority of the commission, and I'm looking forward to us continuing to find opportunities to expand child care accessibility. And yeah, looking forward to supporting this order. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Mohammed. Questions or comments? Commissioner Cho.
No, look, I just want to thank my colleagues, Commissioner Hasegawa and Commissioner Mohammed, for their leadership on this. I have long been an advocate and supporter of this, but I'm really glad we have these two amazing leaders pushing this. I'm sure it helps that you are both mothers who are probably dealing with your own health, childcare challenges. But I do think that this is both a retention tool, but also a recruitment tool for us as an organization. And hopefully, this will truly move the needle in making our organization one of the best places to work in the state. So thank you, Eric, all the work that you have done, and I'm looking forward to seeing the results of this study.
Commissioner Fellman.
Well, I'd like to add my voice of appreciation to President Hasegawa and Mohammed for taking on what's really a national problem, and for the port, this is going to be the mantra for the next couple of years, that we have to do it locally because we're not looking for the feds to show any leadership. And thank you for Eric's leadership and being able to steward this process through, other than taking umbrage of his opening comments and that my wife's from Kansas. But other than that, I think it's in good hands, and once again, appreciate all your work.
We're not in Kansas anymore, Commissioner. So.
I don't begrudge you for opening this item with just general football talk, because I know you're just really, really excited. As am I. This has been a long time coming. I just want to acknowledge and thank the staff that have been carrying this. So when I joined the port, my daughter had just turned about 1 year old, and I know firsthand just how complicated it could be to try and make it all work between parenthood and getting to where you need to be on time and dependably. And that's not just an anecdote. That's a national crisis that is being manifested right here at home, with very real issues with folks having access to childcare. When we started this, we knew that we needed to have a needs assessment formally in order to be able to understand the scope of the issue for our own workforce and all the different folks who we come into contact with to make our airport and our port work. And so that was the first thing that we funded as a commission. This has been a joint effort by everyone. With that needs assessment, it demonstrated that folks are struggling, that we as a port are struggling with retention, attendance, and productivity, and that namely what folks need is childcare that is affordable, accessible, and flexible. We understand that as a result, we are going to have a multi-pronged approach to answering this crisis. And then what we're doing is we're establishing a business case to be able to do this. So like Eric said in his opening statement, this isn't a feel-good thing or a nice to have. This is an issue that we must address in order to be able to operate efficiently, successfully, functionally as a port. So in its immediate term, what this order is going to do is it's going to create a childcare navigator program, which offers comprehensive, culturally and linguistically appropriate services to help Port of Seattle workers and airport workers understand the existing resources that already exist locally and by the state and other areas. But as Eric also mentioned, even if everybody had access to everything that existed, it still wouldn't be enough. And that's part of what our former study did, is it said, what's one of the things that we're going to need to do? And lo and behold, it said, we need to explore establishing a brick and mortar operation that can create more opportunities for people who work at or near the airport. So the second thing that this order is going to do is it's going to study the feasibility for a brick and mortar child care facility at or near the airport. This is a really big deal. And this is probably one of the most exciting junctures that this has come to. To this point, I felt like, I was carrying it like my baby. Pun intended. And there has been such a recognition and a respect for this issue and the need to be able to identify solutions that this issue has really gotten legs, and it's walking all on its own. If I think all 5 of us were to disappear from the commission tomorrow, this work would proceed and go on because it's that important. That said, we have had a lot of folks, not just internally, but externally, that have been thought partners that have helped us understand and study this issue. One of the issues that did come up is that we realized we had an internal port policy that said that if you are engaged in this process, it actually precludes you from participating in the RFP. So my question for you, Eric, is for the people who respond to the RFP, what does that do to either preclude them from participating down the line as an actual child care provider or facilitator?
Thank you for that question, Commissioner. And so the lesson was very, very difficultly learned in this last process. We were not able to continue with the contractor who did the initial study because of our rules around conflict of interest in procurement. And so that is a lesson that we have talked a lot about over the last few months, and really figuring out what we can do to make sure that we don't make some of the same mistakes again. One of those is just going to be transparency, to say to folks, hey, if you apply for this RFP to help us do this feasibility study, here are the rules around procurement that we have at the port, and you should know those and be aware of those. I do think that one of the things that gives us a lot of optimism is that we are not the first airport to tackle a physical child care center. There are about half a dozen airports around the country that are addressing this issue in various forms, and they're all different. The old joke about once you've seen one airport, you've seen one airport. We know they have different governance models, different funding streams, et cetera. But we do believe there's a lot to learn from them. And one of the things we've learned from them is that there are organizations that understand how to do childcare feasibility studies that are not necessarily childcare providers themselves. And so that is definitely going to be something that we consider in this process, is to say, well, we know that there are X number of childcare providers who could actually do this work. We want to make sure they know that being part of the feasibility study may create a conflict of interest. Maybe it makes sense to also be sure that folks apply that are not in themselves childcare providers, but also do this work just in terms of the feasibility study. So looking at all the different options, working very closely with our legal department, with our central procurement office, with all of our stakeholders to understand how we do this well. This is, I think, discrete work, understanding the feasibility of a child care center versus operating. And so we'll try and find the path forward that makes sure that we don't preclude long-term partnerships that we think could be really great fits for us.
Okay, thanks. Thank you. So in considering the scope of this RFP, the study must collect data, additional data from employers and employees at SEA. It's going to examine operational and financial models for how a fully licensed center could be delivered. So am I hearing you say that this is actually only going to look at feasibility? It's because I understand that it is going to look at operational models.
Yes, I may be using the wrong term here. Okay. When I talk about feasibility, I mean all of those things, right? What is every single piece of information that we need to know in order to successfully build and have a child care center operated at or near the airports? And so all of those things, including down to, as we've talked about, Commissioner, what are the physical regulatory requirements of a child care center?
Right.
How many toilets does it need? How many sinks does it need? What is the access to outdoor space? All of these things that we need to know so that not only can we understand sort of generally the feasibility, but also where could it potentially be at or near the airport? Could it be on the 12th floor of our stock building? Well, actually, no, it can't because there's no outdoor play space on the 12th floor of stock, right? So these things that answer feasibility in all the definitions of feasibility, maybe there's a better term for it than feasibility, and we'll look at that so that we're clear with whoever is responding to the RFP.
Thank you. And then that kind of answered my next question, which was, does this, the scope of this study also explicitly include siting for potential places?
This will inform everything we need to know to figure out where a child care center could go at or near the airport. I think the question, I don't think this study will say it's definitely going to be, right, at gate C5. In fact, it definitely will not be a gate C5. But I do think it will give us everything we need to know to say, okay, here are the 4 to 7 places at or near the airport that could work. And then I think the actual siting has a lot to do with who ultimately is our partner and what they're looking for as well.
Right, and I also imagine that there'd be a potential space that for whatever regulatory or legal reason, it's not the space that could be identified as currently feasible but might require some level of advocacy to the FAA. I'm thinking about port properties being allowed to be used for non-airport purposes, and I don't know to the threshold, but if childcare, if we've made the legal case for this to be considered as an official airport function.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that is front of mind for all of our discussions on this topic, but as I began this presentation, this is an airport operations issue.
Yes.
This is, we are concerned about our ability to have enough high-qualified workers to operate our airports.
And you believe that we've met the thresholds that for all of our properties that we identify as potentially feasible for a location that it would be up to snuff with the FAA?
This is our intention and goal, and we will be crossing all of our T's and dotting all of our I's throughout this entire process to get to that point.
Do you foresee a need for future commission advocacy?
As Commissioner Fellman said, in this world of federal government, I cannot say anything with certainty. So we will absolutely keep that in mind. But our goal is to work within existing regulatory authority, both at the state and federal level, to make this work.
And then I lost track of what I was saying because my colleagues were making fun of me for saying crossing I's and dotting T's. But know what I mean, not what I say. Okay, well, that's it's really exciting to see it get to this point, and thank you so much for the thoughtful presentation. I think like my ongoing concern is, the challenges that'll be there because of FAA regulations and requirements, making sure that we are compliant with all of them, and that the scope of this is not just feasibility, and it turns out it's not feasible. It's about what is the path to get to yes, because we're determined to make this happen.
Yes, we should. I would almost call it a business plan, except that's not the right term either. But it is. We'll call it a roadmap project.
And then timeline.
Like
Can you just clarify timeline?
Yeah, that is. So our goal. We have a draft of the RFP. We'll be running that through all of the final checks, and we'll be ready to release that pretty soon. Especially now that you all have authorized that, and that will be under the executive director's delegation of authority at these budget levels that we're looking at. We'll obviously keep you fully in the loop there. So we'll release that RFP immediately, and hopefully this is a process that takes somewhere in the range of about a year or so to complete, with drafts and updates along the way would be my goal.
Wonderful. So is there any other questions? Debate? Seeing none, Clerk Hart, please call the roll for the vote.
Thank you, and we will begin with Commissioner Hasagawa.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Mohammed.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Cho.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Felleman.
Aye.
Thank you. 4 ayes, 0 nays for this item.
And the motion carries. Thank you very much. Good job. Woohoo! You can clap for that.
Lots of clapping today.
Yes, lots of clapping. We embrace the clapping. And we are now at presentations and staff reports. Clerk Hart, please read the next item into the record. Executive Director Metric will then introduce the item. Welcome to the dais.
Thank you. This is Agenda Item 11A, the Pacific Northwest to Alaska Green Corridor Project Briefing.
Commissioners, the Pacific Northwest to Alaska Green Corridor is a groundbreaking partnership uniting major cruise lines, home ports, and ports of call in a shared effort to explore decarbonizing the Alaska cruise market. Since its launch in 2022 and spearheaded by the Port of Seattle, this project has gained momentum, as you'll hear. We signed our project charter in 2023 and initiated a feasibility study in 2024 to assess the feasibility of 4 cruise vessels sailing to Alaska on green methanol by 2032. The feasibility assessment is led by the Maersk McKinney Moeller Center for Zero Carbon Shipping, one of the world's preeminent and experienced nonprofit independent research and development centers focused on a net zero future for the maritime industry. We're proud to have this level of expertise working on our corridor. But partners are also undertaking additional initiatives under their own volition. Through the last 2 years, we have combined efforts on engagement and policy advocacy, as well as greenhouse gas tracking. You'll hear more detail about all of those efforts in the briefing today. We look forward to your insights as we continue leading as we continue to lead the way in sustainable cruising. The Green Corridor has been a major initiative for Stephanie Jones-Stebbins from Maritime, Cindy Kilroy from Environment and Sustainability, and myself, and dedicated staff and partners. We're really putting a lot of work into this. And as we move into the presentation, I will kick off the presentation, and then I will hand it over to, I'm not sure if Sarah goes first, Sarah Auger, Director of Maritime and Environmental Sustainability. Linda Springman is also here, Director of Cruise and Maritime Marketing, and Ryan Child, Senior Environmental Program Manager, and doing a ton of work on the Green Corridor as well. We'll all speak. So with that, Commissioner, I'll start the presentation. We're excited to provide this update to the Commission on the corridor. It's a collaborative partnership with ports and the industry working together, as we know, is to decarbonize the cruise market and the cruises emanating from both Vancouver and from Seattle. Slide 2, please. To kick off today's briefing, I'll share how the Green Corridor Initiative fits into the port's holistic strategy to achieve a zero-emission port by 2050. In our Director of Maritime and Environmental Sustainability, Sarah Auger, will also Linda Springman from Maritime will introduce the concept of green corridors in the Pacific Northwest to Alaska project, and Ryan will take us home to discuss the progress in a recently launched study on green methanol as we move forward. Next slide, please. So I'm trying to give this from the topside view coming down. I want to begin by putting this project in context of our overall vision to be a zero-emission port for both the airport and the seaport by 2050. Across all of our operations, we aim to be a premier gateway for sustainable commerce and travel. This work can position the port as a hub for zero-emission maritime and aviation transportation and ensure our infrastructure and operations are future-ready and resilient and promote health and prosperity for near-port communities. In addition, we can look at them as potential for economic development opportunities as well. Next slide, please. We have 3 pillars that support our decarbonization strategy. Efficiency, we have to do what we can to reduce overall energy use and conserve energy. Electrification, and then once you've taken out all the operational efficiencies, then you move to electrification, electrify where we can to take advantage of our access to low-carbon electricity. And after we do both of those strategies, we move to sustainable fuels. We do this where electrification is not an option, such as with airplanes and large ships, and we need new fuels to achieve our goals, and the port can play a critical role in advocacy and supporting development of these fuels. For both of these, especially because these are global industries as well, as we're trying to approach this problem. So, next slide, please. The port is a catalyst for change. You've seen this diagram before. We do this through leadership, innovating, researching, and implementing new ideas and solutions. We do it through partnerships, teaming with industry leaders, community leaders, and key stakeholders to act, and through stewardship, advancing domestic and international discourse, policies, and investments that can drive change. And collective effort is the key to a success. So we're not going to operate at just one level here. As you know, we're going to continue to operate at all of these levels to address these the transition to these sustainable fuels. These range from the lowest one where we have more direct control over it, or to the higher ones where we're just providing our information on that. So this is it's one of those things where Green Corridor is so important because it can create change here in Seattle, and then those the lessons that we learn through our progress here and our experience with Green Corridors, we can share through other cruise markets and actually all the maritime industry throughout the world. So now at this point, I'll turn it over to Sarah Auger to introduce the concept of Green Corridors.
Thank you, Executive Metric. It's a pleasure to be here today with you and to present this information to you, commissioners. So what is a green corridor? If we could move to the next slide, please. The green corridor is a specific shipping or cruising route where low and zero GHG emission solutions are demonstrated and supported. And we do that through collaboration across sectors to accelerate maritime decarbonization. And the concept of green corridors came out of the 2021 United Nations Climate Change Conference, commonly referred to as COP26, where 24 countries, including the United States and Canada, signed the Clydebank Declaration. And this called for the establishment of at least 6 green corridors by the year 2025. Well, since then, many different green corridor projects have been announced. And on this slide, you'll see a map showing 62 different projects that have been announced. This is through the end of last year, 2024. And this includes 3 green corridors out of the Seattle-Tacoma Gateway. There's the Pacific Northwest to Alaska Green Corridor Project, which you'll hear more about today. And there's also 2 cargo green corridors between the Northwest Seaport Alliance and the Republic of Korea. And so without a single answer for how we decarbonize large ocean-going vessels, green corridors provide a great means to bring together partners across the supply chain to work together on specific routes and geographic areas. This allows the many key players involved, such as ship owners, ports, fuel producers, and others, to synchronize our timelines and work together to identify solutions and reduce the risk of investments and the need that we need to make to transition to zero-emission maritime fuels and technology. The Pacific Northwest to Alaska Green Corridor Project was the first green corridor initiative in the world to focus on cruise ships, and we're very pleased about that. It allows us to work together with the cruise industry to solve this complex challenge and work toward the port's decarbonization goals. And just as we, the port, are working in collaboration with the cruise industry, this project also represents internally a major collaborative effort between the port's environmental department and our cruise department. And the skills of both groups are essential to our Port of Seattle participation. So reflecting that collaboration, I'd like to now turn this over to Linda Springman, Director of Cruise Operations and Maritime Marketing, to introduce the project in more detail. And we believe it's fine. Okay.
Ian, thanks, Sarah. Thanks, commissioners, for this opportunity. Next slide, please. As Sarah described, the Pacific Northwest to Alaska Green Corridor Project is a first-of-its-kind green corridor focused on cruise. We launched the project in early 2022 between a diverse group of first-mover partners. Our partners include 3 global cruise companies, Carnival Corporation, Norwegian Cruise Line Holdings, Royal Caribbean Group, and their associated brands, and their industry association, Cruise Lines International Association. It also includes 2 home ports for ships sailing to Alaska, Seattle and Vancouver Fraser Ports Authority, as well as 5 ports of call along the route in British Columbia and Alaska. Also, 3 non-governmental organizations with connections to maritime decarbonization research initiatives in the region and around the world. First mover partners joined the initiative under the commitment to explore low and zero emission cruising between Washington, British Columbia, and Alaska. Next slide, please. So a little bit more about the corridor. This slide shows a bit more detail and the route we're working to demonstrate low and zero emission cruise travel. There are many unique aspects of a green corridor focused on cruise, including the many different ports involved and differences in size and resources between home ports and ports of call partners, some of which are rural Alaskan communities. We're also looking at a seasonal market, which can create an added challenge as fuel production requires year-round demand, and vessels are deployed to other markets when not sailing out of Seattle. Finally, it's a long journey to Juneau, and cruise ships have to consider the energy loads and ship technology required to make a 7-day round-trip cruise to Alaska on a next-generation fuel, and also need to account for passenger experience and safety. Each of these variables add to the challenge of this project, but also show the opportunity to identify solutions that could be deployed across the industry. I'll now turn it over to Ryan Child, Senior Environmental Program Manager, who will cover what we're doing to find these solutions and our progress to date.
Thanks, Linda, and thanks to the members of the Commission for the opportunity to present today. So we launched this partnership, and if we could move to the next slide, please. So we launched this partnership 2.5 years ago, and I'm really excited to share our progress with Commission today. In our first year after launching, we really focused on convening the partnership, and our initial discussions focused on building a strong foundation. So we focused on confirming that we had aligned objectives, that we all understood kind of what our commitments within this partnership, and also confirming our definitions around what a green corridor is and what we're doing together. All of that work was formalized into creating a project charter, which we were able to sign in early 2023. And then first movers really came to the table in this partnership originally around the commitment to explore the feasibility of low and zero emission cruising. And so we really reached a big milestone in 2023 when we began working on scoping a feasibility study. And we were able to engage the Maris McKinney-Moeller Center for Zero Carbon Shipping to help us think about that study. And the Maris Center is the leading global think tank in advising green corridor projects and maritime decarbonization research around the world. So last fall, we reached a major milestone in that we launched the feasibility study. We began technical work. We were able to hire some consultant support to do that, as well as initiate work across different partners in the study. And I'll speak to the scope of that study in more detail in the next few slides. In addition to launching the feasibility study, I also want to highlight some other areas that we have identified for collaboration that are needed to make this effort real. So we stood up several working groups focused on stakeholder engagement, policy advocacy, as well as a working group focused on developing a greenhouse gas emissions baseline. And I'll speak to that work a little bit later on in the presentation. So next slide. So I wanted to share more about the scope and approach for the green methanol feasibility study that's now underway. The study is led by the Maris McKinney-Moeller Center for Zero Carbon Shipping, and the Maris Center is providing in-kind support for the project under their mission to accelerate the decarbonization of the maritime industry. We worked with the center to scope the study, and partners agreed to the project goal of assessing the feasibility of 4 cruise vessels sailing on green methanol to Alaska by 2032, with the first methanol-powered ship in the water by 2030. Within the context of the study, we also assume that bunkering will only take place at the home ports, so that's Seattle as well as Vancouver, BC. So we're not looking, at least in this initial phase of study, into the feasibility of bunkering along the way or bunkering green methanol up in Alaska. Because we are working with the Maris Center developed a blueprint for how to conduct feasibility studies on green corridor projects. And their methodology is really focused around understanding the technical feasibility, the regulatory feasibility, and then the financial feasibility of a project, so the feasibility of green methanol in cruise. So that means that a key output of this analysis is to inform a cost gap. And what that means is, what is the additional cost of green methanol for cruise in the Alaska market compared to conventional fuels? And the Mayer Center's theory of change is around, if you can really identify that cost gap specific to this area and then work to close that cost gap, that is what makes a project feasible. So a lot of the study is really oriented around kind of understanding these corridor-specific costs. As I mentioned, we were able to launch into technical work of that study last fall. That work, it remains underway. And study partners signed a project commitment letter, which is a letter just formalizing the different organizations that are involved in the study, known as the Project Consortium, and then also formalizing our partnership with the Maris McKinney Moeller Center. We expect to have results of the study later this year and look forward to sharing those. Next slide, please. So before I get into more around the scope of the feasibility study, I wanted to stop and just explain, kind of answer the question of what is methanol. So we're talking about a potentially new zero carbon fuel. So what do we really mean when we say methanol, and what does green methanol really mean? So methanol is part of the alcohol family of chemical compounds. It has properties similar to ethanol, which is used in fuels today. And methanol is not used widely today as a marine fuel, but it is used commonly in many different chemical and manufacturing processes. And methanol has advantages over some of the other emerging alternative marine fuels like ammonia or hydrogen. It has less volatile properties. It can be stored as a liquid at ambient temperatures. And it also, because it's used in these different processes already today, it has an existing supply chain. So it can be moved. It's already shipped around the world. It's transported by rail around the world. So that reduces some of the regulatory barriers that we're looking at in terms of its use as a fuel. Methanol also offers air emission reduction benefits and has carbon reduction potential. And I say carbon reduction potential because if you look at the molecule of methanol, which is depicted on the slide here, it contains carbon. That's the big C in that molecular diagram. And so that means that to produce methanol, you do need a carbon input, or what's known as a feedstock. And so to be considered green methanol production requires the use of a carbon form from either a waste source or captured carbon from the atmosphere or captured from another chemical process. So in that way, the carbon content of the green methanol can be considered net zero, as when the green methanol is burned, if that carbon is from a true waste source or captured carbon, no additional carbon is added to the atmosphere. Next slide. So we worked with the Mayer Center to form a project consortium to lead the feasibility study, and the feasibility study really covers all aspects of the value chain when we look at how to produce green methanol, how to transport it, how to store it, bunker it at ports, looking at ship deployment on vessels that can run on methanol, and then also looking at passenger willingness to pay. So we have different organizations that are involved in the study, all leading each of these different work streams. We've partnered with a green methanol fuel producer, Hydrogen USA. They are leading the fuel production analysis, which will be based on their actual fuel production pathways as well as their actual costs. And I'll note that Hydrogen's participation in the study is there sort of informing the analysis, but there's no commercial arrangement with their participation in the study. So no commercial agreement in terms of who would actually provide this fuel in the future. And then our team at Port of Seattle, we're working closely with Vancouver Fraser Port Authority within the ports work stream, and we're looking at the port infrastructure that is required to transport, store, and bunker green methanol as a marine fuel. Cruise Lines International Association is a really important partner in this work. When we originally were engaging the Mayer Center in how we could use their methodology to do a feasibility study, The Mayor Center doesn't typically work with multiple commercial partners within a Green Corridor feasibility study. And we had already formed this partnership that includes 3 cruise lines that are all different competing publicly traded companies. So we had to navigate that and how we could continue to keep these 3 different cruise businesses engaged in the project, while also kind of protecting their confidential business data and allowing them all to engage in the work. And so that was where CLIA came in leading the vessel decarbonization work stream, as well as the passenger willingness to pay work stream. They are aggregating, working across the 3 different cruise businesses that are involved in the project to aggregate and anonymize information into the study to allow the cruise lines to each play a role in the analysis. And then I want to highlight the passenger willingness to pay analysis, which is important in the context of this study because the Mayor Center's methodology really centers around how you close that cost gap for that cost premium of green methanol. And so the willingness of passengers to pay more for a greener cruise is one potential driver in closing that cost gap. So it's important to understand that. And then the Mayor Center's role in this consortium is they kind of play a role in terms of overall project manager, ensuring that the work streams are underway following the scope that has been agreed to. And then they will consolidate the results from each of these work streams into a final cost gap analysis. And then at the completion of the study, they will lead discussions about next steps to begin developing a roadmap for implementation. Next slide. So this slide provides kind of a visual overview of that scope of the study. And I think it really helps highlight how what we're looking at on this green methanol feasibility study is the whole supply chain. So we're looking at what's the feasibility of green methanol production? How do we produce enough green methanol to serve 4 cruise ships in one season by 2032? How do we transport that fuel from the fuel production facility to directly bunker it onto the cruise ship or store it in the port area? Looking at the home ports of what's the feasibility of methanol storage and bunkering, what kind of infrastructure do we need at our home ports to support that? And then on the vessel side, how do you build and deliver a vessel that is capable of running on methanol on a 7-day itinerary to Alaska and back, only bunkering at the home ports? And then even on the port of call side as well, there's some regulatory feasibility questions to understand, are there any regulatory gaps for having a methanol-powered vessel call at your port? And how do we resolve those gaps and questions? Next slide. So the Pacific Northwest to Alaska First Movers are also coordinating on other initiatives in support of the green methanol feasibility study and in support of our overall objective of exploring low and zero emission cruising in Alaska. So I wanted to highlight a few of these other initiatives. The First Movers formed working groups on stakeholder engagement and policy advocacy. The Stakeholder Engagement Working Group coordinates shared messaging and communications opportunities. And that working group has really had some major accomplishments in convening 2 webinars to provide annual updates on the project in both 2023 and 2024. And those webinars were attended by over 200 people. We anticipate having at least another communication moment or webinar this year as well. The Policy Advocacy Working Group is one of our more newly formed working groups, which formed last year at the requests of First Movers, and they are developing a strategy to engage policymakers in the US and Canada to advocate for policies that support sustainable maritime fuels and a supportive policy environment for a green corridor project to happen. And then our work on this greenhouse gas emissions baseline and tracking comes from thinking about how we can measure and communicate our progress. And so last year, First Movers agreed to develop a baseline as a starting point to understand the extent of greenhouse gas emissions associated with cruise ships that are involved in this Green Corridor project. So we worked with CLIA and the cruise lines to aggregate verified fuel consumption and emissions data that's reported to the IMO and compile that information for 2019 and 2023, specific to home port cruise ships that are involved in this effort from the cruise lines and brands that are involved in this effort. That work is underway, and the results are under review by the first mover partners, and we'll be discussing a process for regular reporting as well as continuing to track fuel consumption and greenhouse gas emissions. Next slide. So this is my final slide, and I wanted to just highlight some next steps for the year ahead. Our first movers met in an in-person meeting in Vancouver, BC, just a few weeks ago in late January, and we discussed our work plan for 2025 and confirmed our priorities for this year. And really what rose to the top as priority number one is completing the green methanol feasibility study, since that is kind of indicative of what partners kind of came to the table to accomplish. And we look forward to sharing those results. We anticipate the study would be complete sometime around third quarter this year, around this summer, and then we would hope to share those results publicly by the end of this year. We do anticipate opportunities for commission engagement this year, of course, in sharing the feasibility study results as those are available, but also see an opportunity to engage the commission in discussions around next steps for how to leverage those results and next steps for roadmap development as well. And then additionally, as we look to engage policymakers and other elected officials, we also see an opportunity to work with commissioners on that advocacy approach. And then lastly, I wanted to mention that we are, as was mentioned, we're not the only Green Corridor project coming out of the Seattle-Tacoma Gateway. So we are also continuing to coordinate closely with the Northwest Seaport Alliance on their cargo-focused Green Corridor projects with the Republic of Korea. We're working very closely at a staff level, particularly around how we look at kind of overall demand and aggregating demand for zero-emission fuels in our region, as well as port readiness for infrastructure that can support those fuels. So we're ensuring that we can leverage the findings from each of our respective feasibility studies and not duplicate any analysis in our efforts. And now I will turn back to Steve to close. Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan and Sarah, and Linda as well. I'd like to close by reiterating the commitment that we made to this project and the commitment of our first mover partners. It became obvious we had the symposium or the conference up on the Pacific Northwest cruise conference put on by CLIA, and as we got together, the commitment remained strong on moving ahead on the Green Corridor. There was no change with the administration of our partners, both CLIA and the cruise lines, and all of our partners are moving forward on this initiative. So even with the administration change, we still have commitment across all of our partners on this progress moving forward. As a matter of fact, they reiterated, as we heard in the beginning, their commitment to that 2050 and accomplishing that globally. And so we're continuing to share how this, we're continuing to work together on this to move this forward, and we look to continuing to share how our progress progresses as we meet the milestones going forward. So with that, Commissioners, that completes our presentation, and we're open for any questions.
Wonderful. I'll turn to my colleagues to see if you have any questions. Commissioner Cho.
Yeah, thank you so much for the presentation and your thorough explanation. Reminiscent of high school chemistry. You actually addressed one of the questions I was going to have. Maybe someone on the team anticipated it, and that is the interplay between the cruise corridor and the cargo corridor. I really like that the study is focused on the cost gap and what can be done to close the cost gap. And it's my firm belief that scale helps. And as you mentioned, aggregating demand is one of the unique things that ports can do. And I go around preaching that all the time whenever I go talk at conferences. And so I know that these are happening in parallel. It's a ro-ro, and you have one that's on ro-ro vessels, one on cargo, and then you have the cruise. But I do think that there's potential for us to stack the demand for methanol from all these types of vessels. And so hopefully, and I think the McKinney-Moore Center actually did the pre-feasibility study for the Seaport Alliance when we were looking at the Green Corridor between Korea and so they are fully aware. They should be fully aware of of that aspect of it. And so I'm hoping that even though that this is a cruise corridor focus, when they talk about cost gaps, product feasibility costs and production capacity, they'll take into account what's happening in the other realms. One question I had, which is not directly related but tangential to this conversation, is, obviously one of the ways you get e-methanol is hydrogen with CO2. And given our status as one of the eight hydrogen hubs, but also given the status of this administration, have you seen, or has the team seen any changes in funding levels, commitment from the federal government, or how quickly PNH2 is moving as a result of kind of the uncertainty that we're seeing in the federal government? And maybe that's a Sandy question, I don't know, but I'm not sure if Sarah wants to comment on it. But
go ahead, Sarah, and I'll add to that.
Yeah, at this point, I'm not aware of any specific, major impacts. I think many people are monitoring a lot of changes that are happening, clearly, to funding, staffing, commitments. But I know that there's also kind of a enduring interest in energy, regardless of politics. So that gives us some hope.
And I would say I'm looking around to see if Eric Schinfeld is still, because that continues to be something we're monitoring. A lot of those grants come out of the IRA, and especially for the hydrogen hubs. But I think in the hydrogen hubs themselves, they're distributed between red and blue states throughout the nation. So I think there's projects going on. So I think that's one of the factors going into that. But we'll continue. We don't know of any drawback or clawback of funds or anything right now.
Will a feasibility study include, sites? Does it go down to the level of like site selection, or I don't know?
There's hypothetical locations that you would transport the fuel from, but it doesn't evaluate like siting for that facility. Ryan, you want to add on?
Yeah, and for looking at storage, it will tell us kind of how many acres you would need, kind of what are some basic specs around what you would need for those sites. But we're not going to level of detail of like prioritizing different sites for where that storage could take place. We're kind of looking because we're also looking at the transportation piece. So we need to make some assumptions about like where we're transporting to and from. And so we're looking at some existing areas for existing operations, like the fuel currently comes out of Ferndale, Washington, and gets bunkered down to Terminal 91 and Pier 66. There's existing fuel storage on Harbor Island, for instance. So kind of making assumptions around future sites would kind of need to be areas that are zoned for and probably existing kind of industrial like fuel storage areas.
Great, thank you.
Go for it. I'll hold on to mine. Commissioner Felleman.
Well, thank you. It's great to see the updates and appreciate all the work you're doing. I got a couple of questions. One was, well, it's nice to think about the aggregation of demand. It just seems that, like in SAF, there's more demand than there's production, and so we have the catch-22 of. I was really quite amazed. In addition to our corridors, we had that page which showed all the green corridors. Even though they were in different colors, they're still all green corridors, right? Whether they were port initiated or whatever. But that's a lot of fuel if everybody's corridizing. And so that's just one obvious challenge that we're all going to face. And I know with the SAF situation, it's like an airline just has to commit to having a large offtake agreement, and the refineries will respond. And so there's a bit of a chicken and egg problem. So somebody's going to have to commit to it. And so hopefully this very defined corridor that we're dealing with in cruise will allow for a commitment to be made. And it's one of the things I did notice, though, it's a bit of a different route if you leave out of Vancouver than if you leave out of Seattle. Much more open water and probably it's a shorter distance if you start in Vancouver, I would imagine. So I don't know if you measuring the fuel consumption that would probably be different depending on which port you leave out of. But that's really one of my biggest interests has always been the baseline. Like, how do you measure success, and based on what? I mean, the relative change is important, but how are we going to compare fuel consumption or greenhouse gas emissions compared to other modalities? And so what you said here, which was, it seems like one of the most straightforward, is just fuel consumption. So is that because I know there's all sorts of controversy at the IMO about the way Cruise wants to talk about energy intensity use compared to other shipping lines. And, to take all that off the table and just talk about fuel burn, that seems to be the cleanest way to measure fuel, greenhouse gas emissions. So is that the intention? So the cruise lines actually have to report to the IMO their fuel consumption? Is that what that's what I read?
There are reportings to the IMO, yes. And then we're doing a unique baseline for this cruise corridor that aggregates up all the vessels that are in the Green Corridor Partnership going from Seattle or Vancouver to Alaska. And there's lots of different metrics, but really it is about fuel consumption and the type of fuel and the emissions. And Ryan can provide more detail about that, if you like, around what's measured.
I would assume you're going to have two separate fuel burns based on the port of. Obviously, you anonymize the data, but it seems like there would be a Vancouver number and a Seattle number.
For the effort that we're doing right now, and this involved a lot of discussion with CLIA and the cruise lines to kind of get them on board to share this level of information, is that it's aggregated across the whole project. So we're not seeing like the total fuel consumption associated with ships out of Seattle and then separately total fuel consumption associated with ships out of Vancouver. So it's aggregated for both Seattle and Vancouver.
I guess that makes sense, not to cause but one could measure the length of trip and assume otherwise. You can take miles and multiply it by gallons, but be that as it may, it shouldn't be that big a difference. I guess the only other. So when do you expect to see a baseline? When is that going to come out?
So we've done the data collection and we have the results. They were discussed at our in-person meeting a few weeks ago. And so now we're just kind of coming up with how to communicate those results. And I think right now, because what we have is essentially a number in terms of fuel and greenhouse gas emissions for 2019 and then 2023. And so those two numbers don't make up very much of kind of an announcement on their own. So it makes sense to kind of share those along with some additional information about the project and kind of about what we're doing on this study. So we're working to put that together and working with partners on a commitment for how to share that.
So I'm just trying to get clear. So you have 19 and 23, and so are you going to release that as a ballpark, as a baseline?
Yes, our intention is to share that. It's still being reviewed by our partners, so we just haven't released it publicly yet.
And it's based on fuel burn?
Yes.
All right, last thing. So I was on the Sea Change, the first hydrogen ferry that went to San Francisco, built at American Shipyard up here, American Marine. Yeah, in Bellingham. Asking them what was their greatest challenge. Coast Guard certification. They had no tools to work with, so they was like starting from scratch. And so obviously they learned something from this process, but a cruise ship is a little bit bigger than a fast ferry. So where do you see in all these things for that development to be able to keep up with you?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely part of the study and part of kind of the regulatory feasibility piece. And I think that's going to be a big part of kind of the vessel decarbonization pathway work that CLIA is working on and the cruise lines are working on. For us, we did have a conversation with the Coast Guard, so we're trying to understand where there's existing regulatory gaps. We did hear from them that there's some interim guidance around, or interim guidelines for methanol vessel design, and they didn't really highlight any major gaps, but would note that, that it's going to take a process and some engagement with them on kind of making this happen. We also have already had a methanol-powered vessel enter the gateway with the Let Maersk, came last fall to Tacoma. And that really highlighted that this is happening and it can happen. And when staff heard about that, we were sort of like, oh, this already happened. We need to find out how and what sort of hoops do they need to jump through, because that's exactly what we're trying to study. And the study is like, what are the issues there? So that was also really promising as well to see that, this is being worked out already.
And that's one of like 6 that Amazon called for, I think, to make that happen. So it's great. Thank you so much for the update.
Commissioner Mohammed, do you have any questions?
No questions, but I did want to make just some general comments and thank the staff for this work that you all are doing. I remember when we went to Vancouver to make the announcement of the first mover and that initial commitment was being made. It was like these high-level ideas. Everybody was really excited, and just to see how it's all unfolding is amazing. And, I think for the listening public, this work is really difficult, right? This idea that we're going to decarbonize everything overnight. There's not a switch. If we had that switch, we would switch it and make it happen right away. It really takes intentional work, collaboration, commitment from both our external partners to work with us to accomplish these really big goals that we have. And combating the realities of climate change really does take accountability, innovation, and honesty. And we're leaning into those challenges as a port. And I want to thank our partners for consistently coming to the table, meeting us where we're at with these big ideas that we bring forward. And again, just want to thank the staff that is leading this work. Thank you so much.
Thank you. How safe is methanol? Does it go boom?
Well, of course, what my scientists would want to ask, by what metric and test do you want to answer that? And so I think with all fuels, we have to manage that risk. And so go ahead.
Yes. Yeah, I'll be glad. It's flammable like any other fuel. It is flammable. I think it has some unique characteristics. Since I used to be a first responder, it has unique characteristics. When it burns, it can burn. It's different. It's hard to see the flames, if you do and respond to it. So there's some aspects about that. But that's why, like any fuel, you have to have first responders involved as you bring it in. The regulations that you were talking about, that Commissioner Fellman was talking about, we've talked. In addition, the Coast Guard is coming in to talk to us more about this. They're both on the regulatory side and the other side of it as well. So they're continuing to look at that. But if you were bringing a new fuel in, you'd want to talk to the Coast Guard, but you'd also talk to our first responders in Seattle Fire, and I think they've been in some of the conversations that have occurred about that.
Right. So I heard you say that this would need to go into a place that's appropriately zoned, but are our industrial lands currently zoned for fuel storage? Or is that an area for potential future collaboration with the city and a conversation with them?
I think that's an area for future discussion. I'm not prepared to evaluate our zoning on this topic. Yeah, I mean, there is fuel storage that is not presenting on that today. Apologies, but we could look into that more if it's.
I think that would be part of that analysis that comes out on its suitability. If you're going to have storage tanks, with the suitability, what's the zoning and all of that would come out of that.
It'd be akin to the bunkering we see already in the harbor. Those lands.
Commissioner Cho asked questions about the scope of the feasibility study, but does it include an assessment of infrastructure needs or potential updates or investments for our properties for a to support an operation with a methanol-based vessel?
Yes, so it's looking at what infrastructure we would need to store methanol. So it's looking at, first of all, like how much methanol is needed for these 4 ships, and then how much you would need to store at a time, how much you would need to bunker, so how many bunker vessels would you need, and then also, yes, any additional improvements that would need to be made to our docks in terms of like to meet some of the safety requirements around having a vessel be bunkered at our facilities. So it'll look into those issues.
And then for this assessment, are we taking into consideration other ports that have done this successfully and are already supporting methanol vessels?
We have been in kind of our overall program around looking at how we can support sustainable maritime fuels, looking to other ports as good examples, and then also within the study as well, kind of trying to take those lessons in terms of particularly where there's already within like the International Association of Ports and Harbors has different bunkering guidelines for methanol. So kind of looking to international guidelines as they exist.
In that vein, I just want to chime in and mention about 2 weeks ago, we were in Tampa with our colleagues at the AAPA Power Summit and had the opportunity to meet with clusters of other ports who are working on green corridors and convene. We did the same thing last year. And so that partnership and kind of lessons learned and sharing about the challenges and it's just been really helpful, and we plan to continue that. We've been talking to APA about, how we might maintain that type of a venue for that sharing of lessons and ambitions.
And then my last question is, I'm glad to hear that you're getting lessons learned from other areas. We talk about how cruise is sort of trailblazing for other sectors in maritime. And Commissioner Cho will soon be going to Busan for the signing of an MOU exploring a green cargo corridor. How are some of these lessons learned being shared outwards with other areas of the industry? In the future?
Well, I think there's Ryan spoke about the stakeholder and communications team, so we've been promoting our work through their different venues. Ryan, are there specific things in the upcoming work plan that would be relevant to this?
Yeah, we're trying to share our progress and in a lot of different venues, from going to different conferences, engaging with other ports, other green corridor projects. I think also just looking at like the 2 other green corridors happening in our region. On those feasibility studies that are underway, they've really focused more on kind of fuel production and bunkering on the Republic of Korea side of the corridor. And so I think there's an opportunity, particularly with the cruise-focused green corridor, because those vessels do need to bunker here. So it's really an opportunity to kind of, as you mentioned, like the cruise industry being kind of a first mover in this. And so just kind of sharing lessons in our study kind of across these other projects for how we look at like bunkering infrastructure, storage infrastructure for cargo as well. So I think even within our gateway, there's kind of the opportunity to share what we're learning in our study, because they're going to move into that next phase of their project and looking more around kind of the port infrastructure in Seattle and Tacoma for cargo as well in the next few months.
Well, it's an exciting next step in the, living the philosophy and the plan to be able to transform port operations into a clean energy future. It's really exciting. So thank you so much for your leadership. This is where the rubber meets the road. So thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, we are going to, yes, Executive Director Metrick.
President Hasegawa, since we have the environmental team here, I wonder if I can ask a favor. I know we have a member of the team that's retiring, and Kathy Vanick is retiring. I just learned today that she's retiring after 25 years.
Come on up so we can embarrass you.
And her team's. I thought I'd just take a couple minutes because Kathy's been. To recognize Kathy, she'll be retiring after more than 25 years here at the port, and she's the senior manager of a remediation and contracted team with the Maritime Department of Environment and Sustainability. And under her technical leadership, she's successfully advanced some of her most complex cleanup projects on the properties and environments, including the Lower Duwamish Waterway, East Waterway, and the T91 remediation. She's done this with incredible grace and dedication during that time period. And some of these, I don't know, Kathy, maybe you could tell us how long some of these, you've been working on some of these, and but a lot of these have come to fruition. And I know that she's seen as an anchor in a very complicated world of bringing things together. And she's dedicated to not only to her team in the port, but to the race values as well. And her contributions will live here at the port for a long time. So I thought it would just be, since this is her last commission meeting, to bring her up in front of her colleagues and thank her. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
You want to talk a little bit, or say a few words, Kathy?
So I was going to say what Steve said. So 3 of the projects that I've worked on, one started in 2001, Lower Duwamish. Harbor Island, which East Waterway is part of, started in 1985. I was not working on it at the time. And T91, we've been working on since 1999. So all of those sites have gotten to some part of cleanup, but not total cleanup. So seeing the progress they've made, though it took a long time to get there, has been very gratifying. And just being a port employee, a public employee, has been, a blessing for me, because we get to do work that helps the environment, and we're not always penny pinching like you have to do in consulting and some of that. So I've really appreciated the work that I've done. So.
Well, we appreciate the work that you've done. Somebody who's relatively new to the port, you show up here and you just see the tremendous amount of work that's happened, and it takes multiple generations, I think, to see through some of these huge projects. And from where you started to where it is, I hope you also take tremendous pride in being a key player and helping make this world and our communities better and healthier and safer. And our world is better for you in it. And the next step, I think, you can call it as one that's for yourself. And so I hope that you'll find immense gratification in retirement, as you did as a member of the port. And congratulations, you've graduated to a new status, but you'll always be one of ours.
Thanks.
Do any of my colleagues have any comments?
Congratulations in getting out before the East Waterway gets over. It's a daunting task, and Superfund is one of those things that you hope your great grandkids get involved with. So I really appreciate your tenacity and hanging in there with it. It is a lot of planning. Hopefully, we'll get some of that mud out of here pretty quick, and Lower Duwamish is happening. I'm really excited by that, and thank you for all your work to make that possible. Thanks.
Commissioner Feldman stole the words right out of my mouth. You're getting them out just in time, at the right time. It seems like I'm just kidding. No, really appreciate your, 25 years of service to the Port of Seattle. There's a lot of history there and a lot of knowledge, and so I've learned being here for the last few years that not everyone actually leaves the port. They usually take a break and come back in some capacity. So we hope to keep seeing you around. I know there's a lot of history and knowledge that you have that we can continue to leverage as we move forward with some of these projects. So I certainly hope that you're open to lending your expertise and your knowledge to us as we go forward. But I definitely wish you the best in retirement, and I look forward to seeing all the great things you'll do in your next chapter. Thank you.
I also echo those same sentiments and wanted to start off by saying thank you so much for your service. 25 years is a long time, and that commitment to public service means a lot. Thank you for what you've done to protect our waterways and our environment. That impact will be lasting, not just today, but it will contribute to future generations to come. And so I hope that you feel very proud of that work. And yes, thank you again for your service.
Thanks.
And hope you enjoy your time away from this place for a little bit.
I'll miss them.
Thank you so much. Let's give her a round of applause. Congratulations. Thank you, Executive Director Metrick.
Thank you, President.
We are going to go to our last presentation of the day. Clerk Hart, please read it into the record. And note for the record that Commissioner Cho has exited the meeting, and Executive Director Metrick will introduce the item.
Thank you. This is Agenda Item 11B, the 2025 Local, Regional, and Community Engagement Policy Priorities Briefing.
Commissioners, under your leadership, the Port has ambitious policy and government relations goals and priorities. During a time of substantial change and uncertainty at the federal level, our local and regional partnerships are especially critical for maintaining momentum on our shared vision. Today's presentation on our draft priorities provides a roadmap for a successful future. The presenters are Dave Kaplan, Local Government Relations Manager, Sabrina Boyu, Regional Government Relations Manager, Roxanne Murphy, Senior Manager, Tribal Relations, and Nate Caminos, Director of Government Relations. So all from external relations. So I'm going to begin with you, Dave.
Commissioners, as Executive Metrick already introduced us basically, but just so you know, the approach that we took this year was to basically, the memo contains all of the priorities that you as a commission have adopted or are looking to adopt in terms of the changes that we've made, the updates that we've made. Our presentation today is really to speak some of the more highly visible priorities for the day. Next slide, please. Unlike our state and federal legislative efforts, our local government relations work is about leveraging the relationships we have with local jurisdictions to move our policy priorities forward and to identify opportunities to help the local governments priorities that align with our own move those forward as well. After today's commission meeting, and we'll continue our work to incorporate any additional feedback you provide us and seek adoption at the February 25th meeting. With that, kick it over to Sabrina.
All right. Hi. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Sabrina Beaulieu, Regional Government Affairs Manager for the record. And I want to say we are so proud to be your local government relations team. You know me, I cover Seattle and North King County. Dave Kaplan covers East King County. Samantha St. John, who can't be here today, covers East Side King County. South King County, sorry. And we have Roxanne Murphy here with Tribal Relations. So we've got a really stalwart team. We do great work. Local politics is our first line of defense, and we are on the front lines of delivering the Port's mission to all that we work with on the local front. So I'll quickly run through just a couple of key achievements that we looked at in 2024, and then I'll move it to the next slide about what's coming up in 2025. So one thing I want to note is the Seattle Transportation Levy. Seattle voters approved the $1.55 billion transportation levy, an 8-year levy, to fund transportation projects, and you all as a commission endorsed that levy. Because of your good work and the leadership that you had led us with, we as staff worked diligently with our key partners like the SODO BIA and the Seattle Freight Advisory Board and the Seattle Metropolitan Chamber to advocate for nearly double the amount of funding for the freight-specific investment in the levy. This is unprecedented and huge, and I want to acknowledge it took a lot of bandwidth and hard work, and so now there's over $50 million in that pot. That's never happened before. And we as staff get to work diligently with the Seattle Department of Transportation to make sure those funds are executed in a way that is efficient and thoughtful and that works for our transportation system. It took a ton of effort, and we're grateful for the leadership at Seattle City Council with Councilmember Saka as the chair of transportation and Bob Kettle that really heard what we had to say when we lobbied them and understood it. And so we have 8 years of good work in front of us in partnership with the city. And we're excited to move forward, and I want to thank you all for formally endorsing that levy. Next, as we all know, I just want to take a quick victory lap on the Pier 66 shore power. That was a $44 million investment in partnership with the state and federal government matching funds to connect shore power from Terminal 46 to Pier 66. to post on the map as one of the only ports globally to have shore pair connectivity for all of our cruise vessels. At the ribbon cutting, we had Commissioner Feldman as our marquee speaker, along with Executive Director Metric, but also notably, Seattle City Light CEO Don Lindell and Seattle Deputy Mayor Greg Wong and Bob Kettle and our key cruise partners and labor partners. And because of this good work, largely led by Director Stephanie Jones-Stebbins and everyone we just heard from, Sarah Auger and Ryan, the list goes on, Sandy, we're 3 years ahead of our 2030 greenhouse gas reduction goals, and we are a model for other cities across the nation. And then lastly, just looking back on 2024, there were a number of MOUs that were executed that impact Seattle's waterfront, and that really solidifies us, the Port of Seattle, as having a huge presence here on the waterfront, as we always have. But I want to quickly tick through these because it was a significant amount of staff time, and it just speaks to the fact that we are a key partner on revitalizing Seattle. Quickly, the Pine Street Connector MOU, that was done in a really quick manner, and it was us working with the City of Seattle to develop a partnership to help the city build the Overlook Walk and not impede on and have their construction not impede on cruise operations. That was really quick work. The other that you all approved just a few months ago is the $5 million investment for the Friends of the Waterfront MAU, and that's for the Port of Seattle to play a role in activating the waterfront, and that provides continuity from here at Pier 69 all along the waterfront down to Coleman Dock to say that we are all part of the same waterfront. And when a Seattleite or a visitor comes to the area, they know that the Port of Seattle is just at the top right by Centennial Park. The next that was championed by Commissioner Feldman is the $5 million investment in the Seattle Aquarium as they work to rebuild their infrastructure, and that's to incorporate maritime teachings into their academic programming. And then lastly, this one hasn't come to fruition yet, but hopefully very soon, is the Alaskan Way Protected Bike Lane MOU. We are so close. And I want to give kudos to my colleague, Jerry Poor, who's been leading us through this for years at this point. We are just very close. I know we all see the construction right in front of our building. And this MOU is to create a solidified partnership between us and the City of Seattle. So when that bike lane is executed, we have a key partnership to make sure that it's safe, not only for bicyclists, but for tourists, for cruise goers, visitors, but also our workers right here at Pier 69. So that's a quick 2024 in review, and then we can head to the next slide and look at 2025. Great. You all are very familiar, for the most part, with my portfolio, and it's all industrial lands all the time. And much of my work is guided by the 2016 principle that the previous commission codified, which is there should be no net loss of industrial lands for the port moving forward in perpetuity. So those are the guiding principles I think about that drives my work. And so I know you are all intimately familiar with some of the challenges we have ahead, but at present in the near term, we are working very hard to defend against a new amendment to reopen the historic 2023 Maritime Industrial Land Use Policy that was passed by the City Council and signed by the Mayor. There's a proposal to reopen that policy and introduce an amendment to build housing in the Duwamish-Mick across the street from our active working terminal there at Terminal 46. This is absorbing a lot of my portfolio, and many of you are very engaged in this. We expect, regardless of the outcome of that legislation, to be passed the first week of March. So that is a major near-term project I'm working on. But beyond that, as we look further, the Seattle City Council is facing the 2025 Comprehensive Plan. That is set to pass in spring. The Seattle Comprehensive Plan does not intend to make any adjustments to the 2023 Maritime Industrial Land Use Policy. The Comprehensive Plan focuses on all neighborhoods outside of the industrial area. However, just because of that, nothing precludes amendments by developers to be introduced to make adjustments to the mix, especially Duwamish-Mick. So this is something that will be a major piece of my portfolio as we head into the next few months and we start to see the comprehensive plan shape up. And then I'm just going to quickly touch on the fact that we have the Waska development coming up, adjacent to Terminal 46. We are deeply involved as a key partner there. We're working closely with the Washington State Department of Transportation to ensure whatever future uses occurs there is something that's compatible with a working waterfront. There's also the CEM property adjacent to Terminal 5 that we're really hopeful we can utilize for some kind of electric drayage truck fleet. There's a lot of work to be done. It's a multi-year process, but it's something that's really exciting. And then this is in no means by order of priority, but of course the Teal New Deal championed by our Commission President Hasegawa. This is the foundational kind of leading principles as we think about how we approach industrial lands and how we really build out our portfolios for the next few years as we think about how we bring clean, green energy to the future of SODO. And then lastly, of course, we are closely monitoring the Sound Transit West Seattle Ballard Link Extension alignment to make sure there are no challenging disruptions to our lines of business. And then you just heard from our wonderful Green Corridor Cruise team. That was a ton of information I just sped through, but that's what's going on in Seattle and King County right now.
And now a newest member of our government relations team, Roxanne.
Welcome, Roxanne.
Hi, Shika, thank you. So some highlights from 2024 include the fact that we now have 2 memorandums of agreement with the Suquamish Indian Tribe and the Muckleshoot Indian Tribe, and that's an ongoing gift. We're also working on expanding economic development opportunities for the tribes. It's been an amazing opportunity for me to help with the fishing season, as crazy as it is and as much of a roller coaster as that was, and I'll look forward to keep doing that. Also, we hope soon that we will have Suquamish contractors apply for some of our upcoming construction bids, and that's been an important partnership that we're working on developing. And Commission, I'd really like to thank you for your support of the proclamations that we've had regarding tribal relations to honor the Bolt decision and also Indigenous Peoples Day. Next slide, please. So for 2025, we'll definitely continue with workforce development partnerships with the tribe. And I cannot wait to help with the long-range waterfront planning and getting tribal interests met with that. And then also another highlight is expanding our tribal youth engagement. And I'd just like to close by thanking the Commission for supporting tribal relations and everyone from the Port of Seattle who supports such. Haishka, thank you.
All right, thank you, Roxanne. Good afternoon, Commissioners and Executive Director Metric. My name is Nate Caminos, the Government Relations Director for the Port of Seattle. I'm happily filling in today for Samantha St. John, our East King County Community and Government Relations Manager. Shortly after I came on board in 2019, the Port Executive and Commission leadership invested in the development of an FTE to primarily work with Eastside government and community partners as a countywide special purpose government. And that summer, the City of Kirkland hosted a remote Port Commission meeting at their City Hall as we help bring our regional partners on the East Side to share the many contributions the Port makes on the connections to the growth and development of the region. And then Dave and I actually sat here 5 years, months later and presented the 2020 local regional priorities to Commission, where Kerry Pravitz was first week with us in that newly formed role. And over the past 5 years with Kerry and recently with Samantha, we successfully saturated and informing various and countless Eastside partners of all of what the Port does and its many services. And we've done this by elevating our intergovernmental engagement with the 20-plus cities in the region as the various businesses, industry, and communities that make up the fastest growing part of our county and state. And I'll briefly walk you through here on these next 2 slides of some of the key highlights from the past year. But as we then turn our attention and focus for the art of the possible in 2025 and beyond, there's a lot of exciting potential opportunities for us to do more as we hope to even be more prominently plant that flag on the East Side, as I say. On the first slide here, big thanks to Commissioner Feldman for bearing the nearly 100-degree heat to deliver remarks at our in Issaquah for our Port Unplugged event last summer. A ton of community chambers, small business owners, came out to Pickering Barn, including representatives from every East Side city for the second year in a row, which is a back-to-back yearly accomplishment, building off the 2023 Port Unplugged out in Woodinville with Commissioner Cho. Speaking of plugs, a bit of a plug too. Puget Sound Business Journal is organizing a brief travel and tourism program at Baden Bauer Center this Thursday. Arf Grouse and Stephanie Jones-Stebbins are our featured speakers, along with our partners at Alaska Airlines, Visit Bellevue, and many others. And Visit Seattle will also be in panel, but we also have a lot of our East Side industry partners in attendance. I recently learned, actually on the Bellevue Downtown Association study tour to New York, that for the first time there are more tourists who are staying in hotels, dining at local restaurants, and shopping at local businesses in Bellevue on the East Side, more than any other people who are visiting the region for work and business. And we're told that they're noticing that increase due to the growth and connections of tourism from our cruise seasons here on the waterfront has brought to that region, and the work on ecotourism that Commissioner Feldman has also helped spearhead for us and partners in and around Snoqualmie Valley. Commissioner Hasegawa, you've also raised regional transportation as an area of focus for us on the East Side. And there's a good couple of areas I'll hit on briefly today, and of course our regional transportation guru, Jerry Poor, is with us here today as well. One item I'll flag on that is Visit Bellevue's recent launch of the privately run shuttle service between downtown Bellevue hotels to the airport and back just a couple months ago. Recognizing that's been a key area of interest to the Commission and some of our East Side partners over a number of years. Last year, as well, the Port supported 2 federal raise grants for King County and Woodinville on the East Trail, and they got both of them. King County was awarded $25 million and Woodinville $5 million on the former 42-mile BNSF rail corridor. As I referenced at July 2019 remote Commission meeting in Kirkland, City Hall, Commissioners Calkins, Feldman, Executive Director Metrick, and others took part on a tour with the city of the Cross-Kirkland corridor's development at the time. But did you know that the Port purchased the rail corridor from BNSF and sold off segments to King County and individual cities, but that the Port absorbed more than $22 million as part of that larger transaction to make the purchase possible for our public partners to infuse economic development and active transportation opportunities for the residents, workforce, and commuters throughout the 42-mile trail. Beyond the Cross-Kirkland corridor, what King County Parks, the cities of Redmond, Renton, Bellevue, and the future development Woodinville will be able to do is transformational. Additionally, PSC has been able to build out their electrical grid for the future with their 10-year Energize East Side project, and Sound Transit's Line 2 station connections that opened last year now connect to various parts of that trail, both of that are expected easements. Not to mention the arts, music, and cultural opportunities that have since launched as a trail directly connects to parks, businesses small and large like Google's Kirkland campus, and what we saw in 2019, and the BIPOC artists who've been able to leave their mark on organized performances, commissioned murals all along that corridor, all in large part of the significant investment the Port made by playing an integral role in facilitating the purchase and sale of the corridor 15 years ago. We will continue to tout the Port's contributions as we document, acknowledge, and recognize the pivotal role we played historically, but as several developmental projects continue to be underway throughout the backbone of the East Side. Also, as we envision that SCA to SCA Trail, the work of the East Trail in Renton 2 will also connect to the Lake to Sound Trail and open the possibility of connecting the future segment of that trail to SCA in the coming years, and thus fully connecting our airport and seaports to the East Side. The last bullet point here is something we work on jointly with the NWSA, but the continued work on ensuring freight mobility remains a top mind as the valley continues to grow in population and future transportation infrastructure is considered and planned as our surrounding communities near the I-90 corridor feel the pressures of new development. King County Councilmember Perry has been a big steward in bringing all the key public and private partners together for those planning purposes for the last few years, and we've regularly had a seat on the table for that. Next slide. Commissioner Wittrow was here earlier and has dutifully served for us on the Bellevue Chamber, and we've also had staff representation on Bellevue's Policy Council. We actually be presenting the Policy Council tomorrow on all the great work that we're doing at SCA. We've also worked with Leadership Eastside and other organizations on their annual class project relating to the work at the airport as well, building an off-an airport tour that we were able to host for them this past fall. Commissioner Calkins spoke last week about growing opportunities with four-year universities. And while we already do quite a bit with two-year community and technical colleges and four universities through our various departments, there certainly are opportunities to strengthen these further. On the east side, a few years ago, UW partnered with Bellevue College on expanding their curriculum and programs, and we've recently heard from them that there's an interest to partner and grow more together as well. Commissioner Mohammed, when we met with the mayor and city council at the city of Woodinville last summer, in addition to the work the city is doing on the East Trail, city leadership were intrigued by our Maritime Innovation Center and expressed interest in working with us to potentially launch an incubator on the east side too. What would that look like exactly to help complement the existing prospective industry growth anticipated for the region that could perhaps be in conjunction with our work with UW and Bellevue College and others? Lastly, in closing, there's a lot that I can continue on about that's going on the east side, and all exciting opportunities for us to do more. And I feel we're well positioned and well resourced with staff talent to further explore. As we think about the evolution of our growing presence and what the 2.0 version of that will look like. With that, I will now hand it back to Dave to speak on our work in the South King County. Dave?
In South King County, we were successful in advancing a number of items on behalf of the port, but we only have time to speak to a few of them today. Needless to say, the first of those, with the release of the FAA's Sustained Airport Master Plan's draft NEPA environmental assessment, we are able to finally provide an opportunity, a comprehensive opportunity for the public and local jurisdictions to engage on the master plan. As we committed to, we provide them a 30-day advance notice prior to release of the NEPA document and beginning of the public comment period, held 4 community informational events, provided city council briefings, supported an extension of public comment beyond the 30 days set under the NEPA rules, and provided presentations at both the Highline Forum at its start and with specific outreach to various communities in South King County. Regarding North Sea-Tac Park, we advanced our discussions with the city of Sea-Tac through the JAC as we work toward permanent protection of the park. The successful effort on the port's federal government relations team to secure provision in the FAA reauthorization bill early last year has helped provide flexibility in moving the issue forward. In support of our economic development department, the Des Moines Creek Business Park West project in Des Moines should begin construction sometime this year. And this is the last undeveloped buyout property that the port owns in the city of Des Moines. In Burien, we've been working with the city on redevelopment of the northeast redevelopment area near a 1 property. That's the last of 3 properties in the northeast redevelopment area, which could accommodate port facilities and a possible city maintenance facility. This is the last undeveloped buyout property that the port owns in Burien. Next slide, please. For SAMP in 2025, we'll be continuing our equitable community engagement when gearing up for the draft SEPA environmental impact statement released sometime this year. Having completed the improvements at T117, the next port wetland mitigation bank project is anticipated to be on our property in Auburn and will help facilitate the local engagement as part of that process. Consistent with the specific timeline and items to be accomplished in Commission Order 2024-12, we'll continue to advance discussions with the City of Sea-Tac regarding North Sea-Tac Park and working toward permanent protection of the park. And just as a reminder, the information to be collected relative to submitting a letter to the FAA regarding the lack of needing it for aeronautical purposes is by the end of the first quarter of this year. Options for the commission to consider to be provided to you by the end of the second quarter of this year with a recommendation from the executive director to the commission and a decision to be made by the end of the third quarter of this year. We'll continue to identify potential partnerships with local jurisdictions to support their non-motorized active transportation projects, providing for complete, safe routes to connect to SEA Airport. We began that conversation last year with the City of Sea-Tac, as an example. We will advocate and explore opportunities for partnership to expand options for child care services for workers at SEA. As discussed at the Highline Forum this year, it was a topic that the members had selected that they wanted to hear about, and we discussed. both Sea-Tac and Burien are using grant funding to help grow the number of child care providers in their respective jurisdictions, which may provide some opportunities for us relative to the order that you passed today. And completion of the market study that will support any next steps that Burien, Sea-Tac, or Tukwila pursue regarding development of a South King County International Public Market. Last night, the Burien City Council authorized the city manager and city staff to apply for a federal grant for infrastructure to cover 5th Avenue South between 152nd and 151st for potential outside location, covered outside location for an international market. That happened just last night. A number of organizations in other jurisdictions, such as Renton and in Federal Way, are also looking to develop public markets. Last slide, please. I know that was a lot to consume from all of us all in one sitting, and obviously you've had the memo. We've had an opportunity to sit down with each of you during the course of the last several months, last several weeks. So if you were open to any comments, suggestions, or answer any questions you might have.
Really, that's it? Okay, Commissioner Mohammed.
Sure. No comments. I want to just thank you all for your hard work that you put in, the memos that you provide, and just your ability to cover the entire region and to do that in a way that is engaging and thoughtful. And I always love when I am able to accompany you guys or provide a presentation somewhere, whether it's on the east side, Snow Valley, South King County, wherever it may be. I can tell how deep the relationships you guys have with those individual stakeholders are, and it serves the port well. It allows us to be able to advance our economic development priorities. And Nate, I heard that we can take some credit for the tourism boom in Bellevue, so kudos to all of us on that, maybe? All right, leaving out. And Dave Kaplan, I really appreciate the work that you do in South King County, engaging with our airport communities, just as a collective, incredible, important work, the work with the tribal communities. It means a lot, and we can also already see the return on investments, us being able to engage those particular communities and advancing our workforce development goals. And so just lots of thank yous.
Thank you. Thanks. Commissioner Feldman.
I think that general point about when we go into a meeting and all of a sudden it's like port's a known quantity and it's known well as a quantity. It really is that entree that we're not breaking ice, and that's greatly appreciated. It's certainly on all fronts. I think that's really a fantastic thing. With regards to the East Side Rail, though, the corridor, and that was John Creighton's baby, and he really initiated that leadership on that. And I remember when we took the walk, it was clear to me that there was no sign that this had anything to do with the port. There was no signage whatsoever. And we talked about that, and there was going to be some little interpretive facility built, and I said, where's the port plaque here? And I didn't realize that we went into this for $20 million.
Yep.
Right? And so, the fact is, we don't have a lot of demonstrative examples of investments in the East Side. And this is a massive one. And the cities have done a fantastic job of, as you pointed out, cultivating this non-motorized corridor to the benefit of some really large businesses. And it's a great amenity for the community. And I just think that it was a leadership of the commission that initiated that, and the folks on the East Side shouldn't forget it.
Absolutely. Full disclosure, I'm on the East Shore Partners board, actually chair of the East Shore Partners for the next 2
You're
years.
slacking.
You know, when I was at Puget Sound Energy, also full disclosure, I was on the Regional Advisory Council and support staff. And I remember working with Mayor Marchione at Redmond at the time, and we toured New York City with the Seattle Chamber. We're like, wow, looking at the High Line, what an incredible, but why is Toyota a corporate sponsor? What's the nexus for corporate partners together? Now we have T-Mobile, we have Amazon, we have REI. I mean, all these other, Google, I mean, all these investments that have made in like, wow, how do we get here? But we're still in its infancy. And when we did walk the cross-Corcoran corridor in 2019, I remember that conversation, and we worked with the city about how are we transforming businesses who were having their backs towards the trail to now face the trail as an entity, as a draw for a lot of the folks. And how do we go beyond just Google campuses to restaurants, retail, and whatnot? And so we are working, at least on the East Shore Partners side, due to my infiltration of the organization, on documenting the history. We worked actually with Dan Thomas and a team too to really get the finite numbers to clear what's there on each of the public pages, but also start working on signage and helping better tell that story, the various channels about all of these things are possible. Like Christy True came up to me at every groundbreaker, like this wouldn't have been possible without the port, but we got to do a better part of telling that story, given the history and the folks that we're still here.
Excellent. Thank you. And do we have a commissioner for the Island Forum this year? Has somebody stuck up?
We're figuring that out.
Okay, because then in head of all those South End entities, that's a real Codsworth place to be. I just said I paid my dues. All right, thank you.
Okay, so my question is, when did that BNSF purchase take place?
I'll look at Pete Ramos too, and Jerry Poor. Pete was with the King County at the time, but Jerry, you helped facilitate
It was a while ago,
2009, 2010.
That's really interesting lore. Thank you for bringing back that institutional memory. You know, it's in the context of something bigger. So thinking about the work that you all do in your respective regions, there's like an immediate core of influence, but it's all regionally connected. Dave, I think about the work that you're working on with SAMP, but how there's a growing geographic interest in that. And we've talked about doing listening sessions. You've done listening sessions in the airport adjacent cities. How is the team thinking about doing that on flight path communities and Federal Way and Beacon Hill? This work is going to get bigger as the process unfolds.
It's an excellent question. There's obviously development of what the next round of engagement is going to look like relative to the SEPA environmental impact statement when it comes out toward the end of the year. And we have existing roundtable now with South Seattle and Beacon Hill community. And there's obviously opportunities to be able to present to them and to glean input when we get to the formal process that we're legally obligated to do relative to the solicitation of comments. I know there's been other discussions relative to Vashon Island and others. The port did reach out. In fact, I think we presented there in 2023, tried to bring the FAA along with us. They tend to be a little reticent to do that. But what that did result in, the FAA wound up holding an online town hall to talk about aviation-related issues and overflights that they would not have done, I don't think, if we hadn't encouraged them to start beginning to engage with the communities more directly. Also, I think the FAA reauthorization bill, some of the provisions in there put more of an emphasis on the FAA connecting more directly and not necessarily entirely through roundtables to be able to engage with people who have interest or concerns regarding aviation issues. So.
And then, Sabrina, I think the same thing applies for the industrial lands conversation. It's with the Seattle core epicenter, but with really expansive regional implications. And my question is for the whole team, right? Because understanding that all of these issues require public education, they require coalition building oftentimes. it requires having physical presence, and not just in the different areas of King County, which is expansive, but also in Olympia during session. What resources do you foresee yourself needing in order to carry the pieces of work that you're respectively leading as it grows into its next phase?
That's a great question. It's something we continue to think about. Primarily in front of us, we're thinking about how do we expand this messaging in our conversation with PSRC and the Greater Seattle Partners and Seattle Metropolitan Chamber. But beyond that, how do we think outside of the region? I don't know if I directly have an answer on what we need, but as we, especially with the Teal New Deal work and the symposium we're looking at, maybe there could be some kind of entree in how we take the findings from that and present it to our friends in Olympia or something along that line of thinking. I'm not really sure, but
think about it. I'd like to invite Nate, and I also want to hear from Roxanne in your respective roles. Go ahead, Nate.
Yeah, just to add on to that, I think one of the key roles, at least my experience here, even before I came to the port, is that we're an incredible convener, right? Even at, the work that we're doing also, especially with your leadership, Commissioner Hasegawa, in regards to the development of the South Seattle Roundtable, for folks who don't know, is a way that we stepped up to make time, talent, resources to engage and bring all of our multi-government partners from local to federal together in a room and have a convening forum to be able to engage with residents, community leaders all throughout the South Seattle region about things that are going on without the airport, maritime side, all of our operations. But we don't do everything. There's also many other various organizations and government partners who have jurisdiction and oversight over their projects of interest too that might overlap or are connected. And so us playing a connected role in that, when we're talking about engagement beyond about what we're here doing on our local level, as it also applies back to DC and Olympia. Even, I'm saying all these things that we're even just doing this week. Tomorrow is our Start Olympia Lobby Day, where we're working and bringing our other partners with our near airport cities to go down to Olympia to talk about our joint legislative agenda in the same way that we were successful in going out a year and a half ago to DC with our DC Start Fly-In, and where we're able to get 4 of our 7 collective asks enacted in the FAA reauthorization bill, including the North Sea-Tac Park. So there's many ways in which we are continuing to step up to bring our partners together, both in Olympia, in DC, and here at home. But I'll let Roxanne speak more about the tribal relations resources question.
Thank you. Coming up, Roxanne. In your work with the tribes, especially understanding that we've got the MOUs underway, what resources do you need as this moves into the next phase?
Well, just to say it most simply, ongoing support from our whole organization, from the top of the leadership all the way down to the staff level, really is of great assistance. I think we're at a point in time where, generally speaking, the tribes are really happy with the Port of Seattle. I keep on hearing elders and tribal leaders say that they appreciate this work that we're going to continue to do. And I think the next phase is going to get to some potential like policy changes, things that we could do where I could get commission support, because maybe we can get some laws changed so we can get apprenticeships and tribal partnerships to increase their rate of apprenticeships in priority for tribal preference. That's one example, but we always want to keep looking for opportunities for ways that commissioners can be involved in the work with tribal relations, showing your values, but then also the partnerships and the eagerness of the tribes. So I'll be continuing to think about these things as we go forward, especially as we're going to be actively working to develop work plans that we will bring back for you all to take a look at, especially for the committee of the commission that works on tribal relations. So I can answer any other questions if you have any.
Thank you. That's it. Oh, did you have something
No,
to add?
the only other thing I was going to add is that one of the great things that Nate has brought as our government relations director has been the cross-pollination between what each of us do in terms of sharing information about the things that we're involved in. We're all kind of early warning systems in terms of picking up on opportunities or things that may be coming our direction, where to be able to make connections, to be able to help bring resources, at a focal point when or where we need it. from existing resources. I'll give more thought about any other resources that we might need, which is a great question that you posed, and I wouldn't hazard a definitive answer right now, but the fact that we communicate so well and we partner so well among whether it's state, federal, local, international, tribal.
Well, I just want to commend our external relations team broadly. You guys are doing a phenomenal job, but it is hard work and it's meaningful work because it's in the process, I think, where you really strike gold. So thank you for your hard work. And Commissioner Fellman has additional comments.
So despite our good work, we are getting correspondence from constituents regarding concerns that the SAMP is an EA and not an EIS, amongst other things. And we have this confusing thing about the SEPA process that is an EIS. I had wished early on that it was a combined effort, and I'm not asking for a legal decision. Don't get too nervous here. But I guess the food for thought. I mean, knowing that an EIS is coming down the road, while we're getting these comments on the EA, in terms of communicating with the public, how these things are sequentially jiving and where these opportunities for public comment are going to be, it's confusing for the normal person. The fact that some of what they're asking for may be coming up subsequently. You don't have to answer the solution here, but I think it's incumbent on us to be able to communicate with the public how these things are related or not. But we have our environmental expert director to help me with this, perhaps.
Well, which is why you'll note that I said it's the FAA's NEPA environmental assessment, and they'll make whatever determination they make relative whether or not an environmental impact statement is required in the end.
Yeah, I would just add Sandy Kilroy, the Senior Director, Environment and Sustainability. So I hear your question, and earlier Commissioner Hasegawa's interest in a very thorough public outreach process for the SEPA. And I would just reiterate that once the FAA has finished their comment review and response to comment, they will release their decision with the response to comments that would address, of course, all the comments received, and then we will then move into that SEPA process, and we will be fully communicating as best we can through a robust and holistic engagement process what the SEPA is, how NEPA and SEPA relate, and how we'll be moving forward. So I think you'll see at least, if not more, public engagement with the SEPA process that you saw with the NEPA. And we'll continue to keep commissioners in the loop on that.
So SEPA won't start until the NEPA is done?
The schedule at the moment is to complete NEPA and then start SEPA. The schedule right now is for that to occur, NEPA Q2, Q3, draft SEPA Q3, Q4, of course. As with other conversations today, what's happening at the federal level may impact that, and we're watching and looking for any changes, and we'll let you know.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I'd also like to make a request that for the extent that we've been conveners and demonstrated ourselves to do that successfully, that we renew that effort in 2025 at Vashon Island. I've heard from our counterpart in Councilmember Mosqueda at the King County Council that she'd like for us to be able to go back and do primarily a listening session and maybe sort of like a 101 on SAMP, similar to what we were doing in South King County. So just want to formalize that request. Thank you all. Any further comments, questions? Thank you for the presentation, you all. Thank you, everybody. That actually brings us to the end of our agenda. Does anybody have any closing comments or referrals to committee? Yes, Commissioner Fellman.
So, I mean, I heard a lot from staff that they want to, you know, there's nothing the feds can do that's going to change our affirmation for support of OEDI. So, like, if anybody's concerned about that, let's just put that to bed. I think what you see here in this commission is stronger than it's ever been before. And so rest assured, we're not caving. Right? So let's just get that one out of the way. However, I've been wondering, why on earth was Seattle or Bainbridge Island the first place for Japanese Americans to be deported, so to speak? And to me, that's one of the questions I was wondering. Is it because we were some backwater place where the media may not have caught attention to it? Or was it this racial tension, like Portland used to be a Nazi headquarters? Why here?
Stay tuned for the next episode of the
I mean, no, to me, that's disturbing to me.
It
that
is.
It would begin here, and I'm just wondering whether there is been any. And we have a national monument now in Bainbridge Island, right?
And I will also add that because of the Trump administration and their challenge of DEI, that they put a freeze on all of their DEI-related websites that posed a challenge to their priorities, and including among them was that Bainbridge Island national site website. It has since been re-engaged, but to your point, Densho, who helped read that into the record, they are an archive, and they have worked deliberately to be able to understand how and why that happens. But I think part of the point of the Day of Remembrance is understanding that it's all intentional. It's not on accident. And so I am going to look into that, and I will come back with an answer for that at our next meeting, because that's a really good question. Absolutely. And Commissioner Mohammed, do you have any closing comments?
Sure. I just also want to respond very quickly to our Port of Seattle employee resource groups. We heard you loud and clear today. I said during the State of the Port that here at the Port of Seattle, we are built on our diversity of industry, workforce, and thought. And we will continue to build on that, to thank those who do the important work here at the Port of Seattle and continue to defend them. And we will stand for our values and continue to do that, regardless of what administration may be in office. And I also want to take this opportunity to thank our firefighters, the first responders, those who keep our facilities, workers, and travelers safe at the Port of Seattle. Again, I want to thank all of our staff that presented here today, the staff that keep our operations running, and our business partners. Our port stands strong, and our commission will continue defending the values that make us who we are here at the Port of Seattle. And like I've said before, diversity is not a weakness, it is an advantage for us. It is the foundation of innovation, resilience, and global leadership. And and here at the Port of Seattle, we are not here to rewrite history, we are here to honor it. And it is Black History Month, and so to everybody who is celebrating, I hope you enjoy Black history and that you reflect on our history. And Black history is U.S. history as well. And so with that, I just again want to thank everyone who makes this port work.
Thank you. And I just wanted to add that I've been invited to attend a listening session with our Latino employee resource group, and that for any of the ERGs that are organizing those sort of either physical or virtual spaces for us to be able to be there as commissioners, as you find it valuable and meaningful to you, please do reach out to the commission office and let us know. And we heard you loud and clear in public comment for that which we're talking about internally about steps that we can take to meaningfully protect and uplift our communities. We do consider you as thought partners in that. And I'm particularly grateful to you for writing in ahead of this meeting, asking us to reaffirm our dedication to DEI programs, our office, and our policies. They stand firm. I stand in solidarity with my colleagues and all of you at the port in commitment to that. And I'm particularly proud of the proclamation that we passed today that did reaffirm those commitments firmly as well. Executive Director Metrick, do you have any closing remarks for us today?
No, I don't, Madam President.
Thank you very much. And with that, folks, the time is 3:24 and we are adjourned.